Hey guys, Chaos Shinobi here. This is a story where Naruto meets a man named Sora who is a dragon sage who unlocks a seal, unleashing Naruto's locked potential and also training him to be the best shinobi with his dragon soul. Now let's begin. Chapter 8. Everyone was moving towards the edge of the tower to go back to Konoha when Sora, at the head of the group, stopped tensing up. Naruto, you feel that? He said loudly. Naruto nodded and said, "What is it?" Sora's face grew grim. "I want you to stay with everyone and let no one leave this tower. Any attempt, even Shunshin, will result in death." Many people seemed both shocked and disbelieving at the same time. Sarutobi spoke up. "What's wrong, Sora?" Sora frowned even further. "I'll let Naruto fully explain the reasons." He turned to Naruto. "This aura? Remember it well. This is a Baylor's aura. They are second only to Pit Fiends and the Biju in power. Right now you could probably take a squad of Hezru, but don't push it," he said seriously. He turned back to the crowd. "Listen up. If you leave this tower, your death is your own fault. I will not protect you. Stay inside and you can leave when the demons outside are gone. All demons are from Dungeons & Dragons Monster Manual version 3.5, which I also do not own." Gaara's eyes twitched. "Demons do not scare me." Sora glared at him. "Ichi, shut the fuck up. This ain't playtime with the kitty ninjas anymore." He turned to Naruto. "Full power. No limits, anything gets near the tower's entrance. Kill it." He looked at Anko and whispered, "You stay here. I haven't trained you yet, so you'll be a huge beacon to them." Anko looked confused. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "I don't have time for this," he said, annoyed. "Look, when I marked you, you became half dragon. Much like Naruto. The only difference is Naruto can control himself. You can't. I'll explain everything more fully tonight, okay?" He whispered to her so only she could hear. Anko seemed a little miffed at his attitude but nodded. She could feel his annoyance and, was that a little fear? Coming from the mark. Sora turned to the entrance and actually smirked, feeling the thrill of battling demons was one he hadn't felt in almost 3,000 years. He walked out and everyone heard, "Come and get it. You'll be dining in hell tonight, boys." With Sora. He was disappointed. They kept sending platoon after platoon of Dreks after him. Did they really think he was so weak? Dreks were the standard foot soldiers. Only about as tall as a 10-year-old, they had long arms that ended in wicked poison claws, short legs that was slightly behind the body itself. The stomach and body area seemed to be one giant bulge from the legs to where the neck should be that went slightly in before comoing out to a hideously marred face. Long ears that stood out to each side of its head, and the spine seemed to come over the top and connect to the small bump above its face. They were weak, but, in numbers, they could take down a newly trained dragon. Sora was pissed. He was Ryujin, the man who decimated armies in the ancient wars. Did they really think he had fallen this far? Enough! He roared into the Dreks, releasing a spray of silver lightning bolts that jumped from each body to the next, incinerating them. He closed his mouth and surveyed the smoking clearing. He felt better. Suddenly he heard crashing in the undergrowth. "Welp, looks like the sergeant is coming into play," he said, smirking. The Hezru crashed into the clearing and charged straight at Sora. This thing was a hulking monstrosity. It had wide-set legs that were as thick as a tree trunk. Its arms were only slightly bigger but had a small horn coming out of his right, one at the elbow. The claws were huge, easily big enough to grab Sora's arm and rip it off without resistance. The face was rotund and had long rows of teeth with deep-set eyes and nose. Its face seemed to be below its shoulder line, much like a Dretch's, but the shoulder line sported a row of spikes, easy to impale if someone was stupid enough to jump on it. Sora smirked and turned to face him head-on. To the demon, Sora looked relaxed, however. He actually tensed his muscles and was ready to spring at a moment's notice. Demons were not fair fighters after all. Just as the demon raised its hand to put all of its charge into a single body-destroying punch, Sora dropped into a stance and brought his right hand up to match the punch. The resounding explosion of dust and smoke billowing out of the clearing was a testament to the power of these two beings. The only question was, which is stronger? With everyone else. Naruto stood at the entrance watching the forest. He sighed and looked back at the group behind him that was getting antsy. It had already been nearly half an hour and Naruto could still feel the demons moving. Sarutobi approached Naruto and everyone watched in anticipation. "Naruto, would you please explain what is going on?" he asked. Naruto nodded but kept his eyes on the forest. As you know, dragons are the frontline fighters against demons. Sometimes, demons get cocky and attack lone dragons when they are out in the wild. Since Sora is here, they are coming after him. That's not entirely true, but I don't want to give away everything yet, Naruto thought. Inoichi spoke up. Wait, you said dragon? Does that mean he is a? Naruto thought for a second. Yes and no. He carries the dragon summoning contract. He is human, but demons target him for it. Those who knew of Sora's real position knew it as a half-truth but kept their mouths shut. Suddenly, they heard a massive boom in the forest and everyone's head turned to it. Naruto heard some clicking noises and his eyes widened. Oh man, please tell me it's not a retriever. I fucking hate those things. The last time I fought one, it turned my leg to stone. Many people's eyes nearly bugged out as a 12-foot spider-looking creature came out of the woods. Suddenly everyone's sweat dropped as they heard, Kami, damn it! I swear you send these things just to spite me, Naruto yelled. The retriever looked a little annoyed at that statement. Its 6 legs propelled it forward, while its 2 front legs, that's 8 altogether, prepared to strike at Naruto. A call of Sanzai Kara Bokashi, Senko, blur from existence, flash, and Naruto was holding a rather plain-looking katana. Close the doors. Now! Naruto yelled as he met the charge head-on. Sarutobi nodded and the doors started to close. Hana saw Naruto just as he blocked to his right before spinning and slicing at the left, knocking away the offending limb. The doors closed and Sarutobi quickly motioned everyone back to the preliminary room. The screen lit up although there was no sound. It showed Naruto jumping back from the demon who stared at him for a second. Siso, you are the one. The next dragon warrior, said. Naruto smirked. Maybe I am. Maybe I ain't. Why don't you come and find out? He said, turning with his left side facing the demon and his right holding his blade back and down. The demon seemed to scowl. You are too cocky for your own good brat. Charged him. The right claw-like leg came down and Naruto ducked under it. He quickly spun and brought his blade up to knock away the left. This dance seemed to continue for quite a while, however it was only about 5 minutes. Naruto couldn't produce enough dragon chakra to cut through the retriever's armor. The demon, unfortunately, knew this and simply attacked without worrying about defense. The dance quickly turned deadly once again as Naruto thought to himself. Not enough dragon chakra even with it reacting to this demon. I'm lucky he hasn't used his eyes. He seems to be underestimating and playing with me, he thought bitterly. Wait a minute, Sora said he developed Byakurai specifically to beat enemies with harder than normal armor. It's a piercing technique that he downgraded to a capture technique. Naruto smirked ferally as he jumped over the right leg once again and kicked off of the thing's chest. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, he yelled, stabbing his sword into the ground. 50 Narutos came into being with puffs of smoke. Let's see if you can take this, they yelled. With Sora. Up in the tree branches, a huge red beast stood 12 feet tall. Its large leathery wings spread slightly to help it balance. It was muscled with a flaming sword in its right hand and a flaming whip in the other. It had a mane of hair behind its head and a mouth that looked like it could rip the throat out of a bear. 2 long horns sported from the side of its head. This thing was a Baylor. He, the great Belnazar, had been sent to destroy the young dragon's soul. All before him had failed, however none were of his caliber. Yet, here he was staring at what could possibly be the worst nightmare a demon had ever seen. The Ryujin was fighting his forces. Belnazar had seen this man's power when he fought in the wars. Yet, when all the people from his age had died, the man had lost much of his power. While lower demons still needed to fear him, the Baylor had no reason to. After all, he was nothing but a washed-up warrior. As the dust settled, the Hezru was surprised. No human could physically withstand that charge. Sora stood beneath the giant fist with his own clearly matching it. Is that the best you got? Man, they must have really let the standards drop if that's what counts as a charge these days. Sora said, uninterested. This Hezru had been born after the wars and had no idea who this human was. Too bad. For him, that is. The Hezru, pissed beyond belief that this mere human talked down to him, quickly added more pressure to his head before pushing off and turning in place. He planned to catch the human in a vicious backhand that would send him flying. Unfortunately, all he heard was too slow from the human before his vision turned red and he collapsed into 2 clean-cut pieces. Belnazar was disappointed. How had that Hezru ever made it to under his command was beyond him. He should have been able to at least harm the human. Sora shouldn't have been able to defeat the Hezru so easily. He pushed that out of his mind. He focused on Sora just as he disappeared from Vi. His eyes widened and he quickly turned around to block the double-bladed strike from Sora. "Hello there, Balnazer. Still hiding and letting your underlings weaken your prey, I see." Balnazer scowled. "Ryujin, I thought you had died. After all, you were just human," he said, spitting out the word human. Sora smiled. "See, that's why you demons always lose. You always assume humans are automatically weaker than demons." Balnazer pushed Sora back. Sora simply backflipped and nearly caught Balnazer under the chin. "Humans are inferior. You are nothing more than evolved primates." Sora chuckled and set into a stance. His right blade held parallel to the ground at his chest while his left was near his knee. His knees were bent slightly and his whole body screamed power. "Let's find out, shall we?" Balnazer charged in fury at his insinuation and swung his blade down as his whip cracked out to the side. They clashed as fire and lightning danced in the air. With Naruto. The retriever was a little perplexed as to Naruto's plan. Why create so many copies when Naruto could not harm him? He pushed that out of his mind and instead focused on the clones. Naruto smirked seeing his 8 hidden clones getting into position. Good. Now it was all set. He smiled as he set himself into his imperfect technique. He had been trying to do this for the past month since he learned of his blade. Every dragon has its own soul blade. His focused on speed, which is the staple of this technique. His left side faced the retriever while his blade was held behind him slanted at a 60-degree angle to the ground. His front leg was bent slightly and he stood up straight staring right at him. If you have ever played Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, you know what I'ma do. I love this attack BTW. Check this link if you want to see an image, watch. V equals WKNHCHNJXWA and feature equals related, asterisk. Naruto smiled at the retriever who looked at him puzzled. I haven't quite mastered this yet, but it'll do for you. Ryu no Senko. Dragon's Flash. Naruto spun in his spot, turning around but keeping his front foot planted. He bent his front leg more and his back slightly while crossing his arms, holding his katana at a 30-degree angle up in front of him. Check above link for better vi. He disappeared and 3 semi-transparent visions of him appeared behind where he was. Suddenly, 4 of those visions appeared on the retriever. The retriever smirked because he could feel the blade hit his armor and barely scratch it. That turned to shock as he heard 8 shouts of Byakurai, white lightning. 2 shots apiece hit the scratches and destroyed the armor there. Unfortunately for the demon, those 4 spots happened to be critical organs that were roasted. It fell over dead as Naruto flipped down from above, breathing heavily. Damn, pant. That still takes far too much out of me. Pant, Naruto said. He watched as the demon was swallowed by darkness and made his way to the tower door where he was promptly glomped and forced into a quick tongue war by Hana before he pulled back so the others wouldn't see them. Before anyone could say something, they heard a shout of, Suryuhaha, Dragon Strike, with Sora. Sora smirked as he blocked the blade and dodged the whip by flipping up and, using his sword as leverage, over the giant demon. He had been constantly taunting it, getting him madder and madder. He had forgotten how fun it was to piss off your enemies. Still, he was tired and had enough of playing with his opponent. He still had to explain to his wife and he had a feeling that was not going to be simple. He jumped back. All right, I'm done. This has dragged on long enough, Balnazer. Balnazer scoffed. What makes you think you can decide when the fight is over? Sora narrowed his eyes. This Balchan, he replied. He spoke in a deathly calm voice. Kaminari no Noru, Ryu. Ride the lightning, dragon? Balnazer's eyes widened as Sora's sword started to glow with his lightning chakra and Sora smirked. This is the end, Balnazer. I will not hold back any longer. He raised his right sword above his head. Suryuhaha, Dragon Strike. A silver dragon of pure chakra formed around Sora. Go look at the picture of Sesshomaru with his dragon strike, same thing except silver. He brought his sword down and the chakra roared as it enveloped the now screaming Baylor, who exploded, destroying a good portion of the branch they were on. The strike continued on, obliterating most of the canopy in a 2-mile stretch beyond the demon. Sora sighed. I hate having to kill a demon like that. I prefer to fight them face to face. Anyways, I gotta get back. He turned back to the tower and quickly headed there. As everyone stared at the dragon made of chakra, Naruto whistled in appreciation. Damn, wish I could do that. Most people chuckled nervously while thinking, If he's being trained to use that, we have no way to beat him. After about 3 minutes, where most people chatted wondering if the fight was over, Sora landed in the clearing in front of the tower. He sighed and waved at Naruto and his now pissed-off wife. Crap, now I'm in the shithouse and we haven't even done it yet, he groaned. Anko stormed right up to the nervously smiling Sora and proceeded to hit him on the back of the head. Baka, you better tell me what's going on before I decide to go snake on your ass. Sora nodded furiously as she started to detail what going snake entailed. Normally, Sarutobi would have left him alone, but he needed information. He cleared his throat and Anko turned around then looked slightly sheepish. Is it safe now, Sora? Sora smiled at the intervention and replied, Yo, it's safe, Double-Worm. Just avoid my battle site. It ain't pretty and some of the more squeamish genin will probably lose their lunch. Sarutobi nodded and everyone started to jump through the trees or shunshin away. With Naruto. Hana caught up to Naruto and quickly shunshin to his apartment. He was a little taken aback and looked at her curiously. That is until she slammed her lips into his and proceeded to make out with him on his couch. A few minutes later and the need for air broke them apart. Not that I'm complaining, but what was that for? Naruto asked. Hana giggled cutely as she felt Shiroi snuggle against her leg. You're leaving for 4 years, while it'll only be a month for me. I want you to remember me. Naruto's face fell slightly. You think I could forget about you? He asked a little sad. Hana shook her head and rocked her hips, eliciting a surprised look from Naruto. Not really. I just want to make sure you don't forget why you're coming back to me, she said, her feral side showing slightly. Naruto gulped but decided to play a little game. And just why am I coming back to you, Hana-chan? He asked, smirking slightly. She caught on and was quite happy to play with her catch. She smirked sexily and leaned over to his ear, breathing hotly on his neck. Because you owe me a date, Naruto-kun, she replied sexily. Her feral side was honestly quite happy with the way he was teasing her. Besides those few nights where she dreamt what he'd look like when he returned always got her ready for a little makeout session. Naruto smiled and licked the side of her neck. Sounds like a perfect reason to come back, Tenchi-chan, he replied. She shivered slightly at the lick and proceeded to make out with him once more before smirking and saying, Good, now come on. We are all eating at my place tonight. Mom said to bring you win or lose. Well, win or domination in your case. She chuckled, as did Naruto, before she picked up Shiroi and, after a quick shower for Naruto, the two lovebirds walked to the Inuzuka compound. With Anko and Sora. It was close to dinner time, so Anko went to get some dango while Sora took a shower. Sora sighed as he stepped out. It had been a long time since he had actually commanded dragons into battle, but it seemed, with this recent increase in activity, that both his brother and wife would soon be taking positions in that army. He knew Anko would take to commanding a small elite force well. She was, after all, an interrogation and assassination specialist. Naruto, however, would probably be best suited for a strike or recon group. His high reserves and insane speed would do well for the quick strikes, while his above ANBU stealth, from years of pranking, would aid greatly in recon. Now all he had to do was explain. Anko walked in and set down the dango. She quickly served herself 3 of the 50 skewers and leaned back before settling Sora with a deadly glare. All right, Rukun, what the fuck is going on? Sora simply looked at her and said, You remember when the Hokage and I told you of me being Ryujin? She nodded. I also told you that I am the general of the dragons. They obey my orders on the battlefield without question. All dragons treat each other as family. However, there is a slight hierarchy. Since you are now my mate, you are technically the second in command of the dragon armies. Anko's jaw dropped. I am what? She yelled, almost spitting out her dango. Sora sighed. You heard me. Now your talents are not suited for battlefields. You're a wonderful infiltrator. So I was thinking of giving you direct command of the Shadow Corps. Anko was still reeling, but she seemed intrigued. What's this Shadow Corps you're talking about? Sora smiled, seeing she took the bait. Well, they are the assassins of the dragons. Not all demons hide in plain sight. The ones that don't specialize in hiding within humans or the dredges of society. Shadow Corps are the dragons who are masters of the silent demon killing techniques. They can kill a demon without affecting a human soul. Although the stronger the demon, the harder it is to do, he said. Anko smirked and had a gleeful glint in her eye. You mean you're going to give me the assassination and interrogation squad of the dragons? She asked hopefully. Sora nodded. If that is what you wish, then yes. It is actually larger than your ANBU, plus most of those dragons are eccentric. I'm sure you'll get along just fine. Sora seemed stunned for a second before he realized what happened. One moment he was staring at Anko, the next, well, they were in the bedroom. Anko was straddling Sora's waist, gently rolling her hips. That sounds like a wedding present to me. She leaned in and nibbled on his ear before whispering, "How can I repay you?" Sora smirked and replied, "I'm sure you'll find a way, Hebeheim." Anko simply giggled before engaging in a tongue war. Tonight was going to be a long night. Next morning, 7 a.m. East Gates. Naruto was waiting for Sora to show up. He knew Sora would be with Anko and they had preset the East Gates as a departure point. Suddenly his vision was blocked by two hands and a body was pressed against his back. He smiled, already knowing who it was but deciding to play along. Kind stranger? I cannot see because of your hands," he said. He heard giggling and a heavenly voice called out, "Guess who?" she said childishly. I want to say Hana Inuzuka, but she's supposed to be asleep after that wonderful dinner we all shared last night," he said. Hana pressed herself closer and said, "Maybe she wanted to see her boyfriend off, so she woke up early?" Naruto chuckled, the hands still over his eyes. "Okay then, Hana Inuzuka," he said loudly before proceeding to whisper loud enough for her to hear, "Please be Hana, please be Hana." She chuckled and removed her hands before twirling around in front of him. "Correct," she said, smiling. "Now what would be a good reward for winning?" She continued, putting her finger to her chin while mock thinking. Naruto simply smiled and said, "This." He quickly pushed her against the nearby wall and engaged in a rather heated makeout session, until he heard someone clear their throats. He looked over to see the Sandaime, Tsume, Sora, Anko, and Kakashi. Surprisingly, Sora, Anko, and Tsume were smirking. Kakashi was giggling pervertedly while giving the thumbs up to Naruto, and the Sandaime looked quite amused. The both blushed before backing into the street. Sora spoke up, "Okay, now that you're done sticking your tongue down her throat." That earned him a dodge from Naruto and a whack to the head from Anko. "We will be going. Remember, it'll be 4 years, so say your goodbyes well. Anko is coming with us because I have to introduce her and eventually get in touch with Manda, so she can work with both snakes and dragons." That earned weird looks because only one summoning was possible. He sighed. "Don't ask, it's complicated." They nodded. Naruto smiled and kissed Hana chastely. He turned to the Sandaime. "Well, Gigi, keep those counselors in line. I'll see you for the exams," he said, smiling. Sarutobi simply smiled and handed him the pay for his 2 side missions in the exams. He turned to Tsume. "Make Kiba sit underneath Kaiten-san?" Tsume simply snorted and hugged him. "Call me Ka-san, you little hatchling. Kami knows the way you're going. I'm gonna have to set up a nursery." Naruto promptly turned blood red and Hana screamed out, once again. Naruto turned to Kakashi, who cut him off. "You were right, Naruto. I haven't been a very fair nor good sensei. I was pressured by the council, but that's no excuse. I already called in a favor with Kurenai to get Sakura some genjutsu training. If that doesn't work, some medic training would probably work out better." He pulled out 2 scrolls. "These are my only original techniques. I want you to have them. Chidori is the original. It is flawed and a one-way attack, while the Raikiri allows you to swing the arm instead of a straightforward attack." Naruto looked at the scrolls and back at Kakashi. "Why would you give me these?" Kakashi looked a little pained. "Naruto, I failed you miserably. Those lightning techniques you used were very strong. I am sure you can use these jutsu to their full potential. Plus, I wanted to teach you something even if you have a far better teacher than me." Naruto smiled softly and took the scrolls. "Maybe, I gotta get going. Later, Kakashi-san." Sora simply watched the exchange and smiled at Kakashi's peace offering. When Naruto reached him and Anko, they all waved goodbye before disappearing in a silver lightning bolt. "Somehow, I have the feeling that Naruto is going to be stronger than me when he returns," Kakashi said. Tsume chuckled. "If Sora is teaching him, I don't think old WRM over there could beat him." Sarutobi scowled. "I may be old, but I'll be damned if I let Naruto beat me out yet," he said, his face curving into a grin. He was going to train because he needed to get back into shape. Time skip 1 week. Dango Bar. 1 year for Naruto. Yugao, Kurenai, Hinata, and Hana were having the weekly meeting of the girls. Normally, Hinata wasn't invited but, with Anko gone, Kurenai had brought her along. Hana had an idea of why and she was pretty certain she was going to have to either break a girl's heart or fight for her life. She sighed as Kurenai turned the talk to Hana. "So Hana, how long have you and Naruto been dating?" she asked. Hana noticed the tense form of Hinata but decided to answer seeing as Yugao was to her right and Kurenai to her left. "If it's really so important, since the day before the Chunin exams," Hana said. Kurenai nodded. "What made you go after him?" Hana scowled. "You have to ask? More importantly, why do you care?" Kurenai frowned. "You know why. Everyone knows that Hinata had a crush on Naruto." Hana's face went blank. "So, because a shy little princess who can't even talk to him shows some interest, no one is supposed to chase him?" Kurenai's face split into a scowl. "I told you she held feelings for him." Hana had enough. "Naruto chose me. I don't have to explain myself to you. If Hinata was too timid or shy, then that's her problem, not mine." Hinata whispered, "Why?" Hana looked at her with sad eyes. "Why did he pick me?" Hinata's eyes were shining with held in tears, but she nodded. Hana sighed and said, "To be honest, I'm not sure. He calls me Tenchi because I paid attention to him openly even against the council's orders. All I know is he is too good for me." Hinata's eyes dried a bit, and she leveled a glare at Hana. "Do you love him?" Hana was a bit shocked at Hinata's question but glared back. "I definitely like him enough for it to turn into love, but I want to have some more time with him before I am sure. He always pays attention to what I say and never looks at me just for my body. Not once have I seen him look at another woman while I'm with him. He's loyal to his friends and will never abandon them. He's an alpha in every sense of the word, and I refuse to give up the opportunity to get close to him." Kurenai and Yugao simply watched as the two glared, trying to prove that Naruto made the right/wrong choice. Right for Hana and wrong for Hinata. Hinata finally spoke. "You hurt him and I'll destroy your ovaries. I may be timid, but I refuse to be weak for him." She spoke with conviction. Hana nodded. "Fine with me. He's the only man to ever get this close to me before and I'd hate to see him hurt. He's just too kind for his own good." Hinata glared for a second before she smiled slightly. "So you're the one he met every day for lunch for the past 2 months?" Hana seemed a bit surprised. "Yes, it was me. How did you know?" Hinata started to smile for real. He always smiled when he went up to the monument and was practically glowing when he came back. "You forget my favorite sport is Naruto-kun watching." Hana chuckled. "Just don't go spying on us when he comes back. If my mom has anything to say about it, she might lock us in a room until she has grandpups." The other girls were staring at her like she grew a second head. "What? I'm not lying." They simply started to laugh before Hana joined them. Maybe they could get along after all. Time skip. 2 weeks to exams. 2 years for Naruto. A bright light shined in the middle of a giant battlefield. All around the fighting came to a stop as 3 figures were seen emerging from the light. However, 2 people were staring and crying at the sight. One, Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, stared as their son, now 15, emerged and looked around. "So this is the great battlefield of heroes? There doesn't seem to be anyone who could fight you, Aniki. Naruto already knows of his parents and has received their scrolls with Jutsu, Rasengan, and Hiraishin." Sora chuckled. "Maybe not, but I think you have some admirers," he said, pointing at Naruto's parents. Minato stepped forward. "Ryujin-sama, I says that Naruto?" Naruto's face suddenly contorted into rage. "You don't even recognize me?" He shot forward at speeds only the greatest of warriors could match and decked his father. As Minato stood back up, he found himself on the receiving end of a Ryurendan, Dragon's Barrage, although it was not lethal. "That was for sealing Kyuubi into me and making my life hell." Minato had tears streaming down his face. His face turned to shock as Naruto hugged him. "And this is for caring enough to ask that I be seen as a hero." Minato smiled and hugged his son back. Anko and Sora smiled brightly. Anko grabbed onto Sora's arm. "When are you going to embrace a child like that?" Sora started to sweat, but Anko chuckled and continued. "I expect you to do so after this whole mess with Naruto is over, understood?" Sora nodded furiously, actually happy at the thought of having a child with his wife of now 2 years. Naruto backed from his father and looked at Kushina. He had some tears on his face. "Well, you gonna stand there, Mom? Or do I get a hug?" Kushina promptly rushed him in a red blur before kissing him on the cheek and hugging him to death. Suddenly, Minato stared at Naruto, his face falling. "You're here, but that means you're dead. Oh my, Kami, please don't tell me you're—" Sora whacked him upside the head. "Nah, he ain't dead, Yondaime. But I don't think we have time for full explanations." Everyone looked at him funnily until they saw the legions of fighters looking eager to rip them to shreds. After all, Minato and Kushina were feared in their own right. How powerful was their son being trained by Ryujin himself? Naruto disengaged himself from his mom and drew his katana, speaking its release phrase. See earlier reference. "Mom, Dad, Aniki, Wani-san, what do you say to an all-out brawl? Us versus them?" Minato laughed heartily. "Now that's what I call a challenge. You definitely take after me, boy." Sora and Anko took up positions behind Naruto while Minato faced the right. Kushina laughed. "Let's hope not. I want to see some grandkids before he dies," she said, taking the left side facing the enemies. Naruto chuckled. "No worries there, Mom. I already got Hanatenshi waiting for me when I go back." Kushina smiled. Minato laughed again. Well, little Hana? Look out, Naruto, those Inuzuka are fierce in bed." With a smack from Kushina for the comment, the group moved as one to enter the fight that happened every day and spanned an entire plain. Too bad for the fighters. These people would not lose today. Konoha. Week 3, 3 years for Naruto. In the biggest casino, we see the Sandaime and Jiraiya playing in the poker tournament. Why were they playing? Well, it's simple. Tsunade Senju was playing and losing badly. They promised that if she won the next hand, they would wipe her debts out. If she lost, however, she would have to stay in Konoha. Tsunade sighed as she saw she had a horrible hand. A king of hearts, a jack of spades, an ace of diamonds, and the two of hearts and spades. She sighed once again and folded. "Fine, I'll stay, but what do you want?" Sarutobi smiled. "Simple, for you to train some medic nin. I am changing the current curriculum in the academy. Not to mention, I am finally cutting out the civilian council for this decision. Please help me?" Tsunade smirked. "Fine, sensei, but don't expect me to stick around forever." She had always wanted to start a medic nin program, and with overcoming her hemophobia, but still acting like it bothered her, she could finally do so. Sarutobi simply nodded and they all walked out, picking up Shizune and Taunton on the way. They promptly arrived at the Hokage Tower and Tsunade looked at her sensei when they entered the office. "What is the problem really, sensei? You wouldn't have recalled me if that was all. I knew you had something set up to lure me back just for that," Tsunade said. "Tsunade, is Naruto Uzumaki still alive?" Sarutobi asked seriously. He knew she was his godmother, but he didn't know why she left. She had a responsibility and Sarutobi had let her ignore it long enough. Tsunade grit her teeth. "Of course not. One of your damn ANBU arrived right after the Kyuubi attack to tell me he was dead. That's why I left the village, sensei. You know this," she nearly yelled. Sarutobi frowned. "Naruto is alive and well, Tsunade. Whoever sent that ANBU was not me and lied to you." Tsunade was stunned. She left her godson to this village? That means he survived the— "Oh God, he's the Jinchuriki. Where is he?" she yelled. Jiraiya spoke up. "Calm down, Tsunade. He is fine. Right now he is training for the exams." Tsunade didn't look pleased and neither did Shizune, who was holding Taunton for dear life. "Who lied to me, sensei? I want to know who took my godson from me," she yelled once again. Sarutobi looked her dead in the eye. "What is spoken does not leave this room," he said seriously. Tsunade and Shizune nodded. "Very well. Then let me tell you what has been going on since you left." Time warp. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks to exam Aburame compound. Kintsuchi was being held in a secure room in the Aburame compound. She sighed. The bugs didn't bother her. She actually liked the company. They were chakra draining, however, and didn't allow her to leave. She was waiting to be interrogated as she knew she would even when she agreed to the setup. Her teammates would have simply raped her and then sent her back to Orochimaru with the news of their failure before she was killed for being the messenger. She had jumped at the chance to get out from under the sadistic snake's grip. Shino walked in with his father right behind him. While not experts in interrogation, they had allowed Ibiki to observe through a hidden camera in the room. They would seek the answers for she was their guest. Dependent on the answers, she would gain freedom. Shino stated in his almost monotone voice. Do our friends bother you, Kin-san? Kin shook her head. Not at all, Shino-san. They are very polite and love to put on a show when they feel I am down. Surprisingly, this had happened. When the bugs had sensed her displeasure, they had immediately called some of their more colorful companions and had a slight dance in her room. Shino was rather surprised himself because these partners were not easy to manipulate, so they had done it of their own will. Most unusual. Shino spoke once again. Please tell us of Orochimaru's plans. We will know if you're lying. He was watching her body for any signs of deceit. He had to admit seeing the few bugs crawling on her arms was quite a sight since so few of the female gender allow such things. He quickly cleared his head of those thoughts. She scowled at Orochimaru's name and proceeded to tell them of his plans involving Sasuke and that he planned to attack, but, unfortunately, she was too low on the food chain to learn much besides the time and that Suna was somehow involved. All throughout the explanations and information spilling, Shino and Shibi watched. Not once did she indicate a lie. Their partners trusted her, so they trusted her. It was as simple as that. When all was said and done, she asked Shino, "What do I do now?" Shino seemed to smile behind his coat. "You are a retainer of the Aburame clan. You are free to wander the village unobstructed. Just stay away from the training grounds and clan areas until you are classified as a Konoha nin. You are welcome to a more permanent and less secure room once we have relayed your information." Shibi smirked, seeing the way his son was acting with the young Kunoichi. Much the same way I acted around Satsumi. Perhaps we will be adding to the clan sooner than I thought. The father and son left the room with Kin thinking to herself that maybe living here wouldn't be so bad. Day before the Chunin finals. 1 week before for Naruto. Sora appeared next to Naruto, who was enjoying dinner with the warriors in Valhalla. Naruto, you have 1 week left. It is time for your final training, Sora said. Naruto grew serious. Are you sure I'm ready, sensei? He asked hesitantly. Sage training was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Sora smiled softly. I assure you, you are ready, Naruto. Just believe in yourself and you will do fine. Naruto nodded and said his goodbyes to the band of warriors his father and mother had collected over the years and departed with Sora, who left Anko so she could battle her heart out over the next week while they underwent this training. As they arrived in the Dragon Realm, the hatchlings quickly ambushed Naruto, who proceeded to play with them until Sora ushered them away. Sora smirked at the slightly disheveled look Naruto had before he grew serious once more. Naruto, over the next week, I will train you to pull out your dragon half and manifest it. Once it has been started, however, you will become slightly more animalistic. You also cannot let your dragon half have control or I will kill you. Understand? Naruto gulped and nodded. Suna encampment, that night. A maniacal laugh made itself known to the wilderness. Cuckoo, soon I will destroy you, sensei, and your leaf too, a man yelled. Finals and Niji's revelation. Today was a big day for Konoha. The Chunin exam finals were being held in their very stadium. Rumors abounded, but one thing was sure. Everyone wanted to see the last Uchiha and Gaara duke it out in the finals. However, a few people had bet almost everything they had on one Naruto Uzumaki. Tsunade, Sarutobi, Tsume and Shibi had all placed rather large bets on Naruto not only winning, but getting a Chunin promotion as well. Shibi and Shino had been filled in on everything by Tsume, who had overheard the conversation between Shino and Naruto. Even thought the civilians were excited, the shinobis were anxious. Anyone of Chunin rank and above had been notified of plans for the invasion and the defense of the village. Tsunade would be at the hospital along with Shizune. Jiraiya was going to be taking care of the summons supposedly assaulting the city. Sarutobi, along with a platoon of ANBU, would be facing Orochimaru. The only wild card they couldn't account for was Gaara and Naruto's group. As promised, Naruto, Sora and Anko hadn't been seen in the village since they left. This had actually left Hana in a bit of a funk. She had enjoyed spending lunch with Naruto every day. People were making their way to the arena. The exams were set to start in approximately 1 hour. However, something was off in the arena. The Hokage box, which should have only 2 chairs, had 3. Sarutobi didn't know why they added the 3rd, simply that it was a request from the daimyos themselves. Apparently there was an important person who had the support of all the daimyos coming to attend today. They had also set up small screens in the stands with feeds from the Kage box and a feed going 2 ways from the box to the daimyo seats as well. Basically, the stands can hear the Kages and daimyos talking, while the two previously mentioned can talk to each other. East Gate. 35 minutes later. A bright light appeared and 3 figures stepped through. "Ah, it's good to be home," the golden-haired one said. A smack was heard through the small road. "Baka, we need to get ready for the exams. I'm sure Orochipedo is here too and we need to kill him for our promise," the silver-haired one replied. The golden-haired one smiled sheepishly. "Geez, Aniki, I'm ready, let's just get going already. I wanna see Tenshi-chan." A purple-haired woman rolled her eyes. "Oh really, Gaki? If I didn't know any better, I'd say you want to pop the question," she said. Suddenly the gold-haired man started to sweat. "No idea what you're talking about, Wani-chan. Anyways, Imauta Harasiabi," he said, suddenly disappearing in a golden flash. 2 chuckles were heard as the man pulled the woman closer. "Quit teasing him and he might actually propose," he said. The woman just grinned. "He'll do it anyway. You heard his mom. She refused to let him leave until he promised her." The man simply shook his head and they both took off down the street. After all, you couldn't be late when you were an important part of the exams. Stadium. 5 minutes prior to start. Almost everyone had arrived. The Kazekage had just sat down in his chair when a man walked up the stairs. He was dressed in a breastplate which had an oriental silver dragon coiling around with the jaws right over the left side of his chest. His leggings were some chainmail that went very loose around his lower legs, and his arms were simply open for some reason. He wore a silver cloak and had an ornamental helmet. The helmet is seriously only there for show, so just imagine something dragon-based and go with it. All in all, this man looked ready for war. The Kazekage narrowed his eyes, thinking maybe his plans were ruined. Sarutobi, on the other hand, was surprised at who was wearing that getup. "Sora-kun, is that you?" Sora simply smiled under his helmet. "Yo, WYRM. Good to see you again. Ah yes, before I forget." He reached into his armor and pulled out a talisman with the symbols for lightning, fire, water, wind, and earth. That talisman signified that he had the support of all 5 major countries. Less than 4 people in the history of the worlds had gained that talisman. This man had to be some great warrior or politician for all the daimyos to back him, although only Sarutobi knew which it was. "So you are the one they asked the extra seat for," Sarutobi said, surprised. Sora chuckled. "Quite right. I can't wait to see the matches." The Kazekage chimed in. "Yes, the Uchiha and Gaara will make for quite the matchup. Not to mention I will start my plan during their match. Cuckoo. Sora shook his head as he took his seat to the right of Sarutobi, while the Kazekage was on the left. "Your son, Gaara, is indeed strong, but why do you focus only on those 2? The Kazekage seemed to frown behind his cowl. "You know that little piece of cloth over his mouth? My son is strong and the Uchihas have always been powerful with their dojutsu. The other shinobi here are nothing special," he said. Sora nearly grinned. "Gotcha, you bastard. The Kazekage has never called Gaara his son. Good thing I had my informants ask around Suna. Temari seems skilled, as does Shino, and that Naruto kid seems to have progressed quite well recently." Inwardly, Sarutobi was laughing. He had caught on to Orochimaru the second he stepped into the box. Still, Orochimaru never could see hidden potential. Only the ones who shined up front could get his attention. "Indeed, I am anxious to see Naruto-kun fight. However, we must get ready, the fights will begin soon." Stands. Same time. Anko had arrived and started looking for her friends. She spotted all the rookies sitting together along with their senseis and Hana. Anko could tell Naruto hadn't been able to see Hana yet, because she looked nervous and downtrodden. "Oh well, I'll just have to show off my new gear," she thought, giggling to herself. "Oi, Nai-chan," Anko yelled as she beelined for the group. The rookies and senseis all turned to Anko, only for the men's jaws to drop and the women's to widen in shock. Gone was the mesh shirt and trench coat. Gone was the miniskirt and shin guards. Instead, she appeared to be wearing a skin-tight chain armor. Her entire body was covered, but there were a few spots that had extra amounts of the armor. A piece extended past her elbows and fell to a tip, although it just hung there. On her left and right hips down her thighs was a plaited skirt that extended down to her midcalf and meshed into a small chainmail skirt to cover her ass in front. She had a wakizashi strapped to her left hip. She pulled off the look rather well, not to mention that she looked downright scary to anyone who wasn't gonna war. After all, this chainmail had the same dragon motif as Sora's. Kurenai was happy though and smiled. "Koch-on, how are you?" I haven't seen you in a month. Anko simply smirked back. Well, if you must know. Everyone seemed to lean in. I was with my husband, she said, grinning happily. The Jounins all seemed a bit shocked that she was married. Kurenai felt sad because she wasn't invited to a wedding, but Hana picked up on that and opened her mouth. So when was the wedding? Anko shook her head. We didn't go through all that. Too much hassle. We love each other and that's enough. They didn't have to know she was married by some mark. Kurenai seemed to brighten at that. So who's the lucky guy? The Genin by now were scared that anyone could love this crazy lady. However, the male Jounins were wondering how someone could get close enough without getting killed by either Kurenai or Anko herself. It was a well-known fact that civilians only called her the snake bitch or whore because they couldn't get into her pants. Anko leaned in and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. That is a secret, she said, giggling and taking a seat next to Kurenai. Besides, you'll all know soon enough. She leaned back and watched as the contestants, including Sasuke, seeing as Sarutobi had threatened to burn all of Kakashi's Ika if he was late, stood in a line. Hana looked at Anko and said, You wouldn't happen to know where Naruto-kun is, would you? Hana was a little scared that the 4 years had changed Naruto too much and maybe he wouldn't like her anymore. Shiroi perked her head up as she heard about her comrade and partner. She had been taken care of by Hana, but she missed Naruto almost as much as Hana had. Anko chuckled. If I know that dope, he'll make some scene to come in and impress you. I swear, he wouldn't shut up about you the whole time. Hana blushed at that but was happy he was so dedicated. Hinata looked a bit down, but a nudge from Akamaru seemed to brighten her up. Look, it's starting, she said as clouds started to gather in the sky. Stadium, Kage Box. The day had started with some cloudy skies, but as the Hokage started his speech, the clouds seemed to move closer together. Today we are here to watch these young shinobi battle for their right to be promoted to the rank of Chunin, he started. Once the cheering had died down. Now, Chunins are expected to lead their compatriots into battle. They must be strong of both mind and body. I urge all of you to watch and cheer for those who put their all on the line and wish to show you a good match. Now let us begin. Sarutobi sat down. An inspiring speech, WRM, however. You know they will not cheer for one, Sora said. Sarutobi could only look down at that. Speaking of one, where is young Uzumaki? Don't tell me he's chickening out, the Kazekage stated. Sora simply smirked and looked at clouds. Word of advice, Kazekage-sama. Never count Naruto Uzumaki out. It just might be your downfall. Orochimaru scowled under his cowl. The dead last hurt me? How absurd. Stadium, ground floor. Gemma told the applicants to stand straight and look presentable. Then he held out a list with the matchups. Take a look at this. Dosu has dropped out, so the extra round has been cancelled. The rest of the matches stay the same. Now would Naruto Uzumaki and Niji Hyuga please remain here, and the rest of you take your places in the competitor's box. Everyone complied with him, and soon only Niji and Gunma stood on the battlefield. Humph. I see Uzumaki has decided to accept fate and surrender the match to me, Niji said haughtily. Little did he know how wrong he was. The clouds gathered and people heard lightning cracking above. The stands started to buzz with activity as they looked up. Valhalla, same time. Oi! Everyone shut your giant pie holes, my son is fighting down there, Kushina yelled. Suddenly the whole hall went quiet. You see, after training and fighting with the various warriors for 2 years, Naruto was respected and feared throughout the warrior plane. The gods themselves had given them the day off and joined them to watch one of their favorite warriors showcase his abilities. All gods are female unless otherwise stated. After all, how else can you explain the divine wrath perverts get hit with? As Niji made his comment about fate, said God groaned, Kami, can't you put some sense into that boy? I swear he's worse than rabid fangirls. Kami chuckled. You know that's not how it works. Fate just groaned again and hoped that Naruto could beat some sense into him. Raijin chuckled. Fate, hush. Naruto is about to enter the field. You can change Niji's complex later. Now let's see what you can do, boy. You better put my gift to good use, he thought. Stadium floor. The lightning in the clouds strangely stopped crackling. Suddenly, a lightning bolt struck the ground. What most people see when they see lightning is a flash of bluish-white. However, this lightning bolt was pure gold. Lightning crackled where it struck the ground as a figure appeared. He had golden hair and electric blue eyes. Two bangs framed his face and he had it tied in a ponytail at the base of his neck. He had on an ANBU-type armor that was a dark blue and had no shoulder guards. His pants were ANBU-style black with dark blue lightning bolts dancing across the bottom. His shirt was a plain black shirt with no sleeves. He had a kunai holster on his right thigh. He was about 5 feet 11 inches and seemed to be about 16 or 17 years old. Stands. One look at him and half the girls in the stands were drooling. Well, until a blast of Ki, rivaling a Sannin, hit them. Hana was happily drooling and daydreaming about the new Naruto when she noticed the looks he was getting. That prompted the Ki and the glare she gave just about every woman eyeing her Naruto. Enko chuckled. Now, Hana. You can't kill them for eyeing your boyfriend like a piece of meat. Hana scoffed and started therapeutically stroking Shiroi, who purred in pleasure. Maybe I can't kill them. That doesn't mean I can't scare them away from my Naruto. That's right, he's mine, suckers, and all of you missed out. Now I can't wait to see just how much he has grown lately. Hana suddenly blushed at the insinuation her feral side gave her. Enko was laughing by now. Maybe so, but I have a feeling that your mom is going to be happy when all this is over. Hana's blush seemed to increase as a few chuckles rang through the crowd. Kagebox. Sora chuckled at his brother's flashy entrance while Sarutobi and Orochimaru seemed a little surprised at the display of power. And oh, one had that much control over lightning. Well, unless you were blessed by Raijin. You haven't seen anything yet, my lords and ladies, Sora said. By the end of this exam, I guarantee Naruto will have earned his spot as a Chunin. Orochimaru still seemed slightly skeptical. He was the dead last of the academy. How could he have changed that much in only 7 months? Sora looked at him and replied, Watch the fight, Kazekage-sama. I will answer you later. Orochimaru seethed slightly but kept silent and resolved to wait for the answer. After all, the best things in life are worth waiting for, no? Floor. Naruto smirked as he looked at the stunned audience. Many shinobi recognized his hairstyle and paled when they realized exactly who he looked like. Good, seems some will back my claim, he thought. He waved fondly at the senseis and air-kissed Hana, who smiled broadly back. He turned his gaze to Niji. He knew all about the branch family and especially Niji's story with Kumo. He had met Hisashi in Valhalla, one of the best men he had ever had the pleasure of knowing and befriending. He was glad he had met him too. He had helped Naruto with a little side project of his that should be of great help. The proctor stepped forward to start the match when Niji looked at him. Genma quietly waited to see what he would do. Niji turned to Naruto and said, The skills you shown in the exams were impressive, but it is my fate to win this match. Save yourself the pain and forfeit now. He activated his Byakugan to try to intimidate Naruto. Naruto looked unimpressed. You expect that to scare me, Niji? I am not one of those fanboys you have chasing you around. Niji looked absolutely livid. I am a boy. Proctor, begin the match. Guma nodded and said, First match. Naruto Uzumaki versus Niji Hyuga. Hajime. Niji simply took his gentle fist stance and waited. Naruto was a hothead and the dead last. He would make the first move according to Niji. Naruto sighed and looked at the Hyuga section. He noticed how the majority of the main members had sneers on their faces at this fight. Perhaps I should give them a reason to sneer. After all, they all believe their taijutsu is so ultimate. Bunch of morons. I'll show them that they need to change. He thought, so he put his plan into action. I hope you're not going to rely on your gentle fist style, Niji. That won't work against me, Naruto said loudly, making sure the Hyuga heard. Niji bristled. The gentle fist is the best taijutsu there is. I don't need anything else. Naruto dropped into his kitsune stance and stared at him. In taijutsu, you may be right. Naruto shot forward at Jounin level speeds. Even Niji was surprised at that. He quickly shot a punch with his right that was diverted by Niji, albeit barely, and started an insanely fast barrage of punches to keep Niji from striking back. After a full minute, Naruto jumped back barely winded while Niji was actually breathing hard. Your taijutsu is indeed formidable. However, your ninjutsu skills flat out suck thanks to the short-sightedness of your clan. In the stands, the Hyugas were pissed. Well, aside from most of the branch family who were never taught the stronger moves of the gentle fist and Hayashi and Hanabi, Hayashi was actually smirking. I have long acknowledged our weakness in using nothing but Juken. After all, I myself was beaten many times by stronger opponents because I used only taijutsu. Perhaps Naruto can bring this to light. Niji glared, but Naruto continued. What happens when you meet someone who can blast you from long ranges until you're out of chakra? What if someone can get past the legendary Kaiten your family is so proud of? Allow me to demonstrate. Naruto flew through hand seals and then thrust his hands forward, directing the attack. Raikyu! Lightning ball, he shot a large ball of electricity at Niji. Niji quickly began to turn, shocking and angering many of the main branch members. Kaiten! Heavenly rotation. The lightning quickly dispersed and Niji stopped his spinning. As Niji stopped, however, many were stunned. Behind him, with a kunai to his throat, was Naruto. Your Kaiten has a serious flaw. When you slow down, you become vulnerable to attacks. The Hyugas were not happy with this. How had that boy gotten his hands on a description of the Kaiten? How could he counter it so flawlessly? Niji turned his head slightly and glared. Just as the proctor stepped forward, however, Naruto jumped back as Niji attempted to juken him in the stomach. Naruto sighed. I do not wish to fight you, Niji. I know about the seal on your forehead and I want to help you get rid of it. Niji froze for a minute, then he smirked. You're within the field of my divination. Naruto mentally cursed but copied the stance that Niji got into, shocking the Hyugas once again. Hack Rokujion Sho. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. He yelled, dashing forward to strike Naruto. Tenno Hira Ni Hansuru, counter to palms. Naruto yelled, meeting every attack with the same attack of his own and adding chakra to overpower Niji's. When the attack stopped, many were shocked once again by Naruto. He stood with his palm extended to Niji's pointed fingers, obviously blocking his strikes. The main branch Hyuga were furious. First the Kaiten, now one of the best attacks ever invented, and it was blocked by a mere genin. This was absurd. The clan elders were already plotting to get Naruto arrested for stealing clan secrets. Stands. Kakashi smiled and thought, I may not have been much of a sensei to you, Naruto. However, I am proud to see you standing strong. I have to remember to thank you for my wake-up call and Sora for training you so well. Anko whistled, obviously impressed. She hadn't known he had developed a technique like that. Asuma and Kurenai were equally impressed, as were the genins, especially Tenten and Lee. Yosh Naruto's flames of youth burn brightly, Ji-sensei, Lee said. Indeed. My youthful companion. We must applaud his youthfulness, Guy said. They were ready to hug, but one glare from Naruto stopped that in its tracks. Hana, on the other hand, go Naruto, kick that Hyuga's ass. Showem, who's boss? Well, her feral side was loving the power he was showing and, with severe Naruto withdrawal, had come out. Shiroi was yipping alongside Hana, cheering her master in her own way. Kagebox. Orochimaru and Sarutobi were stunned. Naruto had just stopped both the Kaiten and the Hack Rokujion Sho in one match. Sarutobi knew that the Hyugas would be pissed about it, and Orochimaru was livid that he had missed such a potential body. Sarutobi turned to a grinning Sora. How did he develop that technique? Sora smiled. When we went out of town, we met some Hyuga who offered to help Naruto learn how to fight against a Juken user. He developed the technique so he could fight against Niji. So if the clan wants to complain about clan secrets, we did not steal them, he said, glaring at Sarutobi, making sure he understood. Once he got a nod, Kazekage-sama, you asked what could change him? I counter that with this question. What could you do with 4 years of training under the best warriors to have ever walked this or any land? He said. Orochimaru and most of the stands were curious what that meant. Naruto was only 13, right? Floor. Naruto stared at Niji as they stood across from one another. You know nothing of this seal Uzumaki, Niji said. It is the dirty little secret of Tchiuga clan and the bane of the branch house. Insert sob story with Niji's father here. So you see, Uzumaki, fate determines everything and fate has determined that I will win this battle, Niji said confidently. The stadium was quiet. That was a hard story to take in. Are you done crying and hiding now, Niji? Naruto asked, his eyes cold and uncaring. Because you're not the only one with a seal placed on him at birth. Up in the Kage box, Sarutobi grimaced and knew the fallout of this would be hard. Let me tell you a story. The Yondaime Hokage was the greatest Hokage to ever live in Konoha. He defeated the demon fox, Kyuubi, on October 10th. the same day I was born. Niji scoffed. Everyone knows. I'm not finished, Hyuga, so shut your trap and let me finish my story. Naruto roared. I listened to you. Now you listen to me. The Yondaime could not kill the Kyuubi. It is a high-level demon, no mere mortal could kill it. Instead, he had to seal it. But a human's coils cannot take a demon's chakra. However, a baby who is under a day old could take it in because the chakra coils were not yet fully formed. So the Yondaime decided to seal the beats into a baby born that day. Normally, this is an S-ranked secret. Niji looked a little pale. So you mean to tell me? That's right, Niji. I am known as a Jinchuriki. However, the Yondaime couldn't ask just anyone to use their child, oh no. He sealed it into his own son. My true name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze. I have been beaten and abused since the day I could walk. My own teachers strive to make me learn the wrong things. I get charged triple price for outdated goods, and that's if I'm allowed in the store. Naruto said. However, I no longer carry the Kyuubi no Kitsune. That sent many people for a loop, especially the council members. Then where is it? Niji asked, only slightly afraid. Oh, Kyuubi is gone. He can never return to this plane of existence so long as I am here. Not entirely true, but it'll give me some protection. Naruto thought. Long story short, Niji, you aren't the only one to suffer. Niji scowled. Perhaps you are right, Uzumaki. However, I am still fated to win this fight, he said, his Byakugan blazing. Valhalla, same time. Most of the warriors were sad at Naruto's life. However, that all ended with Niji's proclamation. All right, that's it, Fate said. She raised her finger and brought it down. Lightning came down and struck to the right of Niji and Naruto. Everyone's sweat dropped at the note. Arena floor. The people in the stadium looked confused until Naruto read the note out loud. Dear Niji Hyuga, I am Fate. Please take note that I do not support you in being my bitch. Kindly stop your horrible acting and get on with your life. Sincerely, Fate. Everyone's sweat dropped. Oh wait, there's more. P.S. Naruto. Please knock some sense into him. He could use it. Oh, and Yami and Luck say they want payment. For their luck. Whatever that means. If it was possible, the sweat drops got bigger. Naruto, on the other hand, was sweating bullets. Please tell me that doesn't mean what I think it means. Hana was a little surprised but suddenly stood up and yelled to the sky. Hell no. He's mine first. A crack of lightning hit near her and she sat down blushing. Valhalla. Kushina looked at Yami and Luck. You know what I made him promise, yes? They nodded and laughed. Luck spoke up. We just wanted to see what Hana would do. Yami chuckled. Yeah. Unless she wants to share. Then he's free game. Everyone's sweat dropped. That seems to happen a lot, huh? Yami pouted at their faces. What? I can't help it. Those whiskers make me hot. Kami simply shook her head. Floor. Naruto sighed and wanted to get this farce of a fight over with. Sorry, Niji, but I'm done with this fight. Prepare to lose. Niji was prepared, but all he heard was, Fuin level 4 KAI, before he blacked out. Naruto had a resistance seal on him currently at level 8. It was basically like walking through water constantly. By releasing 4 levels, he had become fast enough to move like Guy when he had the first 2 gates open. He had simply knocked Niji out after he disappeared from Vi. Shausa, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Ganma said. The crowd was silent for the longest time until Kakashi stood and clapped. Hana would have, but she had already embarrassed herself enough. Like a wave, the applause crescendoed. It was defeating. Naruto smiled and waved happily. He spotted Hana and waved even more happily when she blew him a kiss. Sora and Sarutobi were smiling brightly seeing Naruto get so much recognition. As Naruto made his way up, Gaara and Shino were called to the fights. Shino, however, knew he could not win and instantly forfeited. His reasoning was, my companions shall not fight him, therefore I shall not fight him. He just might have earned a Chunin jacket for that. Kankuro and Sasuke were called and Kankuro promptly forfeited because he didn't want to show his abilities before the invasion. By now, the crowd was unruly. The first fight had been exciting. These were boring beyond all belief. When Temari and Shikamaru were called, Shikamaru was ready to quit, but Naruto, accidentally, knocked him over the edge and into the arena. The fight, however, was interesting on an intellectual level. while in the end Shikamaru had won. He quit because he could no longer hold his jutsu long enough to win. While he certainly had the mind to be Chunin, he didn't have the body to do it. Kage box. The council had gathered and quickly went to the Kage box. While most of the lower members stood on the stairs, the clan heads stood by Sora while the advisors and Danzo stood in front of the Kage. The video feeds had been cut to the stands, although the daimyos were still listening. Sarutobi, why did you not tell us of Namikaze-san's heritage? Hamura asked. Simple, you blabbed about Naruto having the Kyuubi in him. Why would you not blab about him being the son of Minato and bringing all of his enemies on us? Sarutobi replied coolly. There's no way that Demon Brat is the fourth son. One Satsumi Haruno screeched. Sora scowled. Why are the civilians here anyways? WR? This is a shinobi matter. According to the laws of your own village, they have no say in such things. Sasami was about to retort when the fire daimyo came over the video. Indeed. In addition, why is the council bothering us when we should be watching two aspiring chunins? Save it for afterwards. And Sarutobi? The aged Hokage looked at him. I want a full account before we are in front of the council, along with a meeting with Naruto and any protectors he wishes to bring. Sarutobi nodded while the fire daimyo smirked as he saw the smile Sora was sporting. Toshiro, I'll be happy to accompany the hatchling when he attends if that pleases you, Sora said. Indeed, Ryujin. It will be good to see you again. I am glad you accepted the special seat. Toshiro replied, fire daimyo. Sora nodded his head and returned to the now-ended fight as the council filed out. Floor. Luckily, the fight between Shikamaru and Temari had taken about half an hour, so Naruto was charged and ready to go after Gaara. Naruto knew all about Shikaku, having been briefed on demons of all types. He had seen the fight between Lee and Gaara and knew about Gaara's armor, so all he had to do was either scare Shikaku, like Sora, or defeat him by blasting through his sand. He would see what Gaara wanted to do. Hopefully, it wouldn't be too damaging. Gaara grinned manically. Mother says you are strong. Not as strong as Big One, but you will spill much delicious blood for Mother. Naruto scowled. Tell Mother that she knows what's going on here and I doubt she can beat me. Gaara scowled and replied, we shall see Namikaze. Genma quickly shouted. First semi-final match. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze versus Sabaku no Gaara. Hajime. I know I said Gaara no sooner earlier about this. Gaara started out by sending wave after wave of sand to chase Naruto all around the arena. Now Naruto had decreased his seal to stage 5. He could outrun Lee right now, so he easily kept ahead of the sand, although it did not allow him time to use any of his techniques. Gaara knew that Naruto could hurt him with that Byakurai technique of his, and he was not going to give Naruto that chance. Too bad for Gaara. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Do I really need to? Suddenly there were 20 Narutos and they each sped off in a different direction. Only 3 got away, but that was enough. 3 shouts rang throughout the stadium in a triangle formation. Raryuden no Jutsu. Lightning Dragon Technique. 3 dragons of lightning charged the Jinchuriki, turning his sand into glass. At the last possible second, the sand formed a dome and protected Gaara. For a moment, all was silent as the jutsus dissipated. Then, the glass came crumbling down and was quickly ground back into sand. The 2 Kage Bunshins were captured and destroyed while the real Naruto was on the run once again. Damn it! He can just break the glass down. Guess I have no choice but to use what Dad taught me. Naruto thought. Now I just gotta find his seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. He created another 20, but they immediately went through hand signs and yelled, Raikyu! Lightning Ball. The 20 clones quickly charged forward behind the balls and headed for Gaara. 3 balls made it to Gaara while the others were intercepted. They quickly turned the sand armor her wore into glass. However, it started to break, and that's when the clones started pounding him. The sand quickly sprang back to life and destroyed 8 clones before the others jumped back. However, they had done their job. The seal was visible on Gaara's chest. Naruto smirked and ordered his clones into action. He held his hand out and the kanjis for the elements appeared in purple flame on his right hand. 10 of his clones quickly blew out another set of Raikyu lightning ball towards Gaara and promptly disappeared, their chakra spent. However, the last 2 clones quickly charged, taking up the remaining sand while Naruto rushed past and slammed his hand into Gaara's chest, yelling, Gojio Fuin! 5 elements seal. Gaara promptly passed out and the sand stopped moving. Genma stepped forward and checked Gaara. Shousa! Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. The cheering from Leaf was astronomical. However, one man was pissed. I needed him to distract the Leaf. No matter, I still have that demon's promise of help in return for fighting the dragon person who is supposedly around here. Maybe it's that new guy. Meh. I don't care as long as I get to kill Sarutobi-sensei, Orochimaru thought. The rookies were stunned at this turn of events. While beating Neji was one thing, beating this psychopath killer was another. Sasuke wanted to fight Naruto to see how far he had come. Sakura and Ino were both happy to cheer on Sasuke, although they did cheer for Naruto during his fights. Lee wanted to test himself as well. Tenten was a little wary to fight him. Chuji, Shikamaru, and Shino didn't want to fight him if they could help it. Kiba was smiling knowing he lost to the strongest guy here, and Hinata was happy that her crush was so strong. The senseis, however, were mostly in shock, except for Guy, who was screaming about youthfulness or some crap like that. Kurenai and Asuma had always assumed that Naruto really didn't have much talent. Well, you know what they say, right? Assuming makes an ass out of you and me. Kakashi was simply happy, although a bit stunned at the increase in strength, while Anko was sporting a grin the size of Russia. Up in the daimyo box, Toshiro was sporting a grin similar to that of Anko's. Damn, am I glad Sora told me to bet on the Yandame's Gaki. I'm making a fortune. Similar thoughts were being made by the daimyo of Wave and Tsunade, Sarutobi, Kakashi, and anyone else who bet on him, not to mention himself. After all, why not rake in the dough under a fake name? All it took was a shadow clone and a henge into his sexy form. The next match was called forward, and it was Temari versus Sasuke. When the battle started, Temari seemed to be winning. She planned ahead more, but she didn't quite take into account for Sasuke's fire jutsus. After trying to get near Temari for the better half of 10 minutes, Sasuke gave that up and proceeded to fire Great Fireball at her. Since she had been using gusts of chakra-infused wind to keep him away, he had higher reserves. After a few minutes, she simply gave up rather than get burned to a crisp. Genma stepped forward. We will give everyone a short 10-minute break to grab refreshments and go to the latrine. This is for the fighters as well as the spectators. Please enjoy. Kagebox. If you gentlemen will excuse me, I have some quick business to attend to, Sora said as he bowed out and vanished in a flash of silver lightning. Orochimaru was surprised but asked, "Does he do that often?" Sarutobi simply laughed. "All the time. You get used to it." Stands. Naruto appeared next to Hana with a golden lightning shunshin. He grabbed her, and Shiroi and Finger waved to everyone before they both disappeared once again. Anko slipped away as well. Naruto's apartment. When they appeared in Naruto's apartment, Hana quickly forced him against the wall and started to French kiss him. When they finally broke for air, Naruto shook his head and said, "Wow, what was that for?" Hana chuckled. "That was for coming back and owning all your competition," she replied. I gotta do that more often then," Naruto said, chuckling. He stepped back and Hana got a close-up look at him. Long story short, he was masculine, he was slightly more feral, he was her age, and he was hot. Naruto turned serious. "Hana, you know about the invasion, right?" Hana nodded and patted a scroll. "I've got the boys right here." Naruto smiled. "Good, because I've got a present for them." He pulled out a scroll and unpacked what seemed to be larger versions of Shiroi's armor, but with wings that could extend and retract. Hana's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. "Are those?" Naruto nodded. "These are for them. I know you couldn't stand to see them hurt, so I had them made." She smiled and kissed him gently. "Thank you very much, Naruto. You have no idea how much that means to me." Naruto smiled brightly at her and pulled out an umbu breastplate like his, except this one was a deep brown that matched Hana's eyes. "This is for you, Tenshi-chan. It's blessed by dragons to withstand high temperatures and protect you from them. It also gives you a slight protection from the other elements. If you channel chakra into it, well, you'll get a chainmail like One-ichan's. However, yours will be the same color as the armor with green leaves embroidered into it. It won't stop a direct strike, but anything glancing will bounce right off." "Naruto, that's amazing. Are you sure you can give it to me though?" Hana asked. Naruto sighed. "Yes, Tenshi-chan. This was made by a special friend of my dad's, and the dragons wanted me to give it to you. Not to mention the Hiraishin seal put into the armor, so I can teleport to you in an instant if anything of retriever status or higher shows up," Naruto thought. Hana smiled gently and took it before taking off her Chunin vest. Underneath, she wore a plain dark green shirt. She donned the armor and was surprised at how light and supple it seemed. "Thank you again, Naruto," Hana said, smiling. Naruto shook his head. "It's no problem. Now let's head back, I have a fight to get to." Hana chuckled at her boyfriend, who seemed to gain a fire in his eyes at the idea of a fight. Right? With Anko and Sora, Anko's apartment. Anko arrived and looked at Sora. "So is he here?" Sora sighed and nodded. "You want him, hun?" Anko seemed a bit surprised and asked, "I thought you didn't want me to fight him?" Sora shook his head. "I don't, however. You are strong enough to take him. Just don't get cocky, and let me help you, okay?" he said more quietly at the end. Anko quickly wrapped her arms around her husband and smiled. "All right, Rukun." Sora smiled and kissed her. "You know those two are probably making out right now, huh?" Anko chuckled. "Hell yeah, they are." The couple's laughter could be heard down the street. Stadium, final round. The spectators and special guests had returned to their seats. The last Uchiha and the newly proclaimed Namikaze were facing off down in the arena. Sora had taken his place at the Sandame's side. However, Anko had joined him. Naruto had told Hana he would fight beside her in the invasion. The Anbu and Jounin were all tense, ready for the signal to start. Genma stepped onto the field and looked at the two opponents. Final match. Sasuke Uchiha and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Hajime. Sasuke slid into his interceptor stance and activated his Sharingan. Naruto dropped into his own stance and smirked at Sasuke. "Well, you want to get this started, or shall I?" Sasuke smirked right back. "I don't need the advantage to fight you. Bring it." He is not cocky. Kakashi has beat him down over the training period, however. He still has issues that will be hammered out. Naruto chuckled and replied, "Fine, you asked for it?" He charged forward and the two settled into a deadly taijutsu dance. After 5 minutes, feathers started to fall and the people began to feel sleepy. An explosion in the Kage box brought most people out of it. The invasion of sand and sound had come to Konoha. The arena was silent for only a moment before the Kage box exploded and 4 figures jumped from the smoke onto a nearby rooftop and were encased in a purple barrier. The Odo and Sand Shinobi that were supposed to be in the crowd went up in puffs of smoke. Apparently, Sora had decided to go ahead and remove the Odo Shinobi from the stands, while spreading the word that the Kazekage was not really the Kazekage but an imposter. Unfortunately, Naruto, Sasuke, and Gunma were facing 10 Odo Shinobi down on the floor. The Shinobi in the crowd were ready to join the fight when Naruto smirked. "Uchiha Sasuke, come with us. Orochimaru-sama offers you power," the Jounin among the group said. Sasuke simply growled and readied himself for an attack. Naruto brought his katana up to bear and held it straight out in front of him. "Ban Kai," he yelled. Think how Ichigo says it in Bleach. His chakra swirled around him and entered the sword before it glowed and changed. Now he held a golden shamshir with a blue lightning bolt arcing from the tip to the handle, which had a dark blue tsuba and golden wrappings around the hilt. He simply disappeared and then reappeared in front of the Jounin, who was too shocked at his speed to move, and decapitated him. He backflipped and dropped into his swordmaster stance. Check chapter 8 for stance. This will be his default stance, and disappeared. 7 Odo Shinobi died due to various lethal cuts, while the last 2 were taken out by Genma and Sasuke. Genjitsu Kara Kieru, Ryu Senko. Vanish from reality, Dragon Flash, Naruto said calmly. Sasuke whistled. Nice blade. Why don't I have one like that? He said angrily. Not now, Sasuke, Naruto said. We need to regroup. Plus, I want to know how Aji-san is doing. By then, everyone in the stands had gathered on the floor. Kakashi spoke up, being the most senior member of the forces. Agreed. It would be a good staging point. We need to get a layout of the village. Everyone to the barrier quickly. The various ninjas nodded and proceeded to disappear and reappear at their destination. Barrier, same time. Orochimaru had just revealed himself to his sensei when Sora and Anko landed beside him. Sora, I'm glad you're here. I could use some help, Sarutobi said before he looked at Anko and frowned. Anko, this is dangerous. You're not. Sora cut him off, never once breaking eye contact with Orochimaru. She'll be fine, WR. She trained with us for years, remember? Plus, my wife won't be beaten so easily. Anko smirked. Yeah, Aji-san, worry about yourself. I'll be fine. Ryukuin over there let me train with some of the best dragons around. I won't get another chance like this. Sarutobi sighed. No matter what I say, it won't change you so. He summoned Enma, who promptly transformed into his staff form. Let's take him down. Sora smirked. Glad to see you so passionate, WRM. He turned his attention fully to Orochimaru, who was watching amused. I'd say, good to see you again, but I'm sure you don't know who I am. In any case, thank you. Sora said. This gained looks of surprise from the 3 other people in the barrier, not to mention the people outside. If you hadn't given Hebeheim here her hickey, I wouldn't have this wonderful mate. So thanks. Anko was smiling broadly, Sarutobi and a kind smile, while Orochimaru looked thoroughly confused. I'm surprised that anyone would claim that failure as a mate, Orochimaru said, gaining withering glares from the Leaf Shinobi. Nonetheless, I'll be happy to see you two together. In hell, he said as he started to run through hand seals. Kuchios, Edo Tensei. Summoning, impure world resurrection. 3 coffins arose and caused Sarutobi to pale. They all had kanji going from sho to an eye to yan on them. Sora looked grim and Anko frowned at her ex-sensei. Outside the barrier. By now, everyone had arrived, even the genin. Naruto looked enraged at what Orochimaru was doing and Hana asked him, Naruto-kun, what's wrong? Naruto gritted his teeth in anger. He's summoning the sho, and I, and Yondaime Hokages to battle the Sandaime, he said. The gathered ninjas were outraged. How dare this traitor summon the old Hokages? How dare he disturb their rest? There's no way they will fight for him, a random chunin yelled. Naruto shook his head. They won't have a choice. He will control them. Many wanted to ask how he knew this information. Kakashi would have asked, if he hadn't been observing Sora. Everyone could hear Orochimaru as he started to talk, and many did not like where this talk was going. Sora growled as Orochimaru laughed. You said I didn't know you? How wrong you are. Sora Ryu, or perhaps Ryujin, he said. I even have a plan for you. I'm glad I decided to take him up on his offer, Orochimaru said darkly. Who the hell offered you anything? Sora asked, a little annoyed at this snake in the grass. A dark laughter filled the air and many of the ninja started to feel a deep primordial fear. Why, I did, Ryujin, said a DP voice. A dark portal was hovering over the barrier. From the portal stepped a thing of freakish nightmares. It had a canine-ish face with a long snout full of sharp teeth, 2 glowing red eyes and horns that curved slightly inward at the top of its head. It had 4 arms, 2 smaller clawed ones on its chest and 2 large pincer ones. He floated in the air, being held up by seemingly nothing. It's not every day I get the chance to become a legend and kill a student of the fabled dragon general. Sora's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Normally, I wouldn't care, but you have piqued my interest. The Glabrizu laughed maniacally. My name? Retsun. You cannot escape that barrier, and I shall deal with your student myself. Sora and Anko shared a look that said, is this guy deluded or what? However, Sora decided to play the game. Really? And what would it take to get you to leave him alone? Retsun smirked. Nothing. I will kill him. You have only trained him for 4 months. He cannot be powerful enough to defeat me and my battalion. The ninja outside the barrier were shifting nervously, the attack seemingly forgotten at the moment. Naruto stood next to Hana and stared straight at the demon who was threatening him. Hana was nervous and didn't know what to believe until Naruto put a hand on her shoulder and smiled. She smiled back and grabbed his hand. Sora grimaced slightly, although he was happy that Orochimaru was holding his attack, obviously amused at this scene. Surely, there must be something? Retsun had a wicked smile. Well, I heard that your student has a potential mate. If he was to give her to me to be my plaything, maybe I could be convinced to spare him. Everything froze for a second before Sora and Anko had the same thought. He did not just say that. Unfortunately for the demon, he was very wrong about Naruto's abilities. The last thing he heard before his vision was destroyed was Ryu Senin Hijitsu, Ryu no Tamashikai, Dragon Sage Secret Technique, Dragon Soul Release. While the demon wasn't paying attention, Naruto's chakra had skyrocketed. His golden chakra enveloped him as he said those words, and his body changed. His legs below the knee changed to scaled and a 5-clawed foot. Below the elbow, the same happened, although the hands remained 5-finger, the claws were retractable here. His shirt disappeared, although his cargo pants remained. and a reptilian tail sprouted from his tailbone. Scales went up his spine to connect the tail to two powerful-looking wings. Every last one of his scales were a brilliant gold color. His eyes shone with a fierce power and fury. Lightning arced around his being, freely manipulated. He disappeared only to create over 100 after images around the Retsun. As Naruto landed, he calmly said, "Ryujin no Senko, flash of the dragon god." The demon promptly turned into a cloud of red mist. Only the more experienced members of Kenjutsu knew just how difficult it would be to hit someone that many times. Sora chuckled. He really shouldn't have said that. Anko barked out a laugh. "No shit, and I thought you were protective." He turned the guy into mist for Christ's sake. Hana was a bit stunned. She hadn't even had time to make a retort before Naruto introduced the demon to oblivion. Surprisingly, his new form had sparked a very feral desire, and that display of strength practically demanded that she acknowledge him. She knew she needed something to quell her feral nature soon, or she may very well jump him. She looked to her right where he stood, his back turned to the Leaf Ninja. Little did she know that he was staring at the demons who were assembled behind the shinobi that were attacking the front gates. Inside the barrier, the coffin lids fell open, causing people to start to sweat a bit. From them, the Hokages of old were alive once again. The Sho and Naidame were exchanging banter with Sarutobi, while Minato stared sadly at Sora. "So I have to fight you, do I? This won't be easy," Minato said. Sora simply sighed and nodded before getting ready to fight himself. He didn't want to, but he was the only one who could match the Yondaime inside the barrier. Orochimaru had enough and stabbed the three people with the tags to ensure their obedience to him. "Sarutobi, you take the Sho and Naidames. I'll distract the Yondaime. Anko, take your ex-sensei," Sora said. The two others nodded and moved to engage. Outside the barrier, Kakashi decided to start barking out orders. "Okay, since there are demons, they will be our top priority. All genin are to report to the caves and help direct and protect the civilians. Chunin, report to designated defensive zones. Jounin, aid in the frontline defense, and I will lead a specialized group against the demons." A random Chunin spoke up. "How can we win? We are being attacked by two nations and demons." Naruto spoke before anyone else could answer. "Will you leave your village to die? This is your home, is it not?" Naruto looked over his right shoulder, his wing held down so they could all see his eye. "This is my home, no matter who or what attacks it. I will not let it fall. Will you?" Kakashi was smiling, as was the majority of his friends. Hana was beaming with pride, and the rest of the shinobi agreed with his words. "Kakashi-sensei, Hana and myself will take the demons. Leave them to us." Both Kakashi and Hana seemed a bit surprised at this. "Naruto, are you sure?" he asked. Hana was silent, but she looked at him questioningly. "Yes, sensei," Naruto replied. "Naruto, why do you want me to join you?" Hana asked. Naruto smirked. "If you want to be close to me, Hana, you gotta learn how to deal with demons. Besides, do I need a reason to go tearing through enemies with a beautiful woman beside me?" he asked. Hana grinned. "No, but you do need a beautiful woman to keep from getting in over your head," she said before she jumped off. "Race ya there, slowpoke." Naruto's smirk turned into a million-watt grin before he disappeared in a yellow flash. "Not Hiraishin, he's just that fast." Kakashi gawked for a second before shaking his head. "New orders for Jounin. Head to the front lines. No one gets into the city. Understood," he said. One chorus of highs and blurring of ninjas later, Kakashi smiled before sunshining himself to the front lines. With Naruto and Hana, somewhere near the wall of Konoha. Hana had pulled ahead and summoned her companions in their armor. She smirked as she blew through a few weak Oto Chunin. Surprisingly, Suna seemed to have abandoned Oto. The Sandaime had planned on tricking Orochimaru into claiming Gaara as his son. Every Suna shinobi knew that the Kazekage would never do such a thing. After all, Gaara was just a weapon. That, coupled with the defeat of the Ichibi container, had prompted a retreat order from the Suna higher-ups. The Sand Sibs were stuck in the hospital, however, and could not escape. Hana blasted through a few weak Oto shinobi only to come face-to-face with the battalion of Drex and Babo and 5 commanding Hezris. She landed and visibly gulped. That was a lot of enemies. The Haimaru triplets growled at the assembled demons. They just seemed to laugh it off as one of the Hezris spoke up. Well, It seems our commander has seen fit to send us a treat, boys. Hana growled, but a very familiar voice came from the trees to her left. I'd appreciate it if you stop eyeing my girl, demon. Although that still won't save you. Naruto said coolly just before he and Shiroi, in her armor, landed beside Hana. Hana smirked. What took you so long? I almost had to take these guys by myself, she said. Naruto shrugged. Well, a black cat crossed my path, so I... Hana groaned. Don't start taking after Kakashi, she said playfully. The demons, however, were not amused. One of the babos launched a fireball at the group of ninja and their companions. Naruto simply smirked before Shiroi jumped and flipped, smacking the fireball with her tail, and forced the fireball to incinerate the very demon it spawned from. Now that wasn't very nice, Naruto said. He turned to Hana and bowed mockingly. Would you like to start this, my lady? Hana chuckled cutely and mock-cutsied. It'd be your honor. Naruto chuckled back and quickly whispered in her ear. Her eyes lit up and she said, uh-huh, uh-huh. She chuckled again and nodded once before Naruto stepped slightly behind her. She quickly rushed the staggered demonic lines and yelled, Ryu Date Suga, Dragon's Great Piercing Fong. Suddenly the 205 demons found themselves on the wrong end of a very powerful assault. 6 whirlwinds of destruction were blazing through their ranks. 4 were using fire to enhance their attacks while the other 2 used wind and lightning respectively. Now, normally, a human cannot damage a demon higher than the basic foot soldiers. Even the foot soldiers have naturally tough skin and resistances. However, with the dragons blessing the armors, and subsequently the claws of the non-dragon fighters, they were fighting at full damage. Needless to say, they were quite effective. Shiroi and Haimaru, who happened to be the most adaptable of the triplets, quickly paired together and started to blaze through the enemies to the right of their masters. Kajimaru and Mokamaru were following their example and flanking their master on the left. Naruto and Hana quickly bulldozed their way to the middle of the demons and started ripping through the little ones like toilet paper. While they may have been many, they stood no chance against a dragon Sannin and his future mate. Inside the barrier, same time, Sora was having trouble subduing his friend. Since that time when Sora had brought Naruto to Valhalla, Minato had steadfastly maintained a friendship with the man who strived to help his son. Minato was certainly faster than Sora, however, Sora was a millennia old. His reflexes and battle instincts far made up the difference. Not to mention that every strike caused some sort of mortal damage. After Minato healed the 2nd strike, Sora was annoyed. When he healed the 7th strike, which happened to be decapitation, Sora was pissed. He hated that his friend was being used like this. Even more so, why he had been summoned. He chanced to look at the other 2 fights whilst Minato reformed. He didn't know how to kill him anyways. Sarutobi was hard-pressed to fight both his old senseis at once. However, his training the past month had paid off immensely. He was able to get most of his skills back on par with his original skill level. Sadly, his stamina had taken a major hit with age, as had his strength and speed. While it wasn't enough to get him killed, against 2 Kage-level shinobi it meant bad things. He could barely fend off their attacks long enough to get away, let alone get in an attack of his own. He knew how to destroy them because of the jutsu being his sensei's creation, but that didn't mean jack shit if he couldn't damage them. Suffice it to say, his battle was far too difficult to win alone. Anko was fighting with a righteous fury, and it showed. Every attack she launched, from her infamous Sanaijishu, hidden shadow snake hands, to her newly acquired Ryu Denka, dragon charge, which allowed her to surround herself in her dragon chakra and charge straight through an attack while poisoning any animals that may be nearby, was precise and incredibly powerful. Orochimaru was having second thoughts about throwing her away. He was pushed to the brink of his abilities. Sora noticed that Minato would be back in about 20 seconds, so he decided to help out the old WRM. Kuchios, Ryu Matsuda no Jutsu, summoning, Dragon Master Technique, 2 puffs of smoke later, and before Sora stood a man with dark black hair and deep red eyes. He was muscular and stood about as tall and broad as Sora himself. He wore a full-plate battle armor that was obviously old but had many markings and ancient defenses built into it. Next to him was a beautiful woman. She had long pearly white hair. Her eyes were a brilliant shade of onyx black and held a deep wisdom. She wore an elegant white kimono with sakura petals falling on it. Oi, Sora, what you calling us here for? The man said. Sora bowed to them. Sorry, Ryukin-sama, Ryuke-sama. I ask that you help out the old WRM over there. He is facing two of his old senseis and I do not have time to explain. The woman, Ryuke's, nodded and looked to her husband. Dear. Lightning cracked and an Oni mask appeared behind her. Do as he says. Ryukin was sweating bullets and nodded before responding. Whatever you say, dear. He quickly dashed off to block an attack headed for Sarutobi. Sora chuckled and quickly hugged Ryuke's. Thank you. She chuckled and leveled him with her gaze. You have taken your duties seriously. Please don't fall again. I don't think the dragons could stand it. Sora smiled softly. Thanks, Kaze. Don't worry. I won't let that happen again, he said, pumping his arm in the air like a certain blonde-haired shinobi used to do. She chuckled and curtsied slightly before rushing off to join her husband. Sora quickly returned his attention to the reformed Minato. Now to deal with you, he said, rushing his friend. With Kakashi and the Jounin. Kakashi and the other Jounin had quickly dispatched the Oto shinobi within the walls. The fighting was heaviest along the west wall because of two snake summons that had broken through. Luckily, Jiraiya had summoned his own toads to counter and destroy them quickly. He took a brief break as the Konoha ninja pushed the Oto troops back. He turned his attention to the main gate where Naruto and Hana were fighting. It seemed that they were almost through. Asuma whistled. Man, they made quick work of those demons, huh? He said. Kurenai was shocked that they had destroyed almost 200 demons in less than half an hour. Guy smiled and did his nice guy pose and yelled, "Wose!" Their flames of youth burn brightly even against such unyouthful opponents. Hee, I love writing Guy. He's so funny. Kakashi smiled and said, "HM? You say something, Guy." Guy scowled. "Curse you and your hip attitude, Kakashi." Kakashi chuckled and said, "I agree, Asuma. It must have something to do with Naruto's dragon techniques. They are making liberal use of Getsuga and Byakurai as well." Ibiki had joined them and looked over to see Naruto and Hana decimate the last of the peons. This should be an interesting fight. The Oto shinobi are in full retreat, so we can leave them to the others. Should we help them? Kakashi shook his head. Nah, we would only get in his way. Asuma looked at Kakashi. Surely he must be getting tired by now? Besides, those are upper-class demons from what I can see. Kakashi sighed. I was informed by the Sandaime about Naruto's training. Part of that training includes how to fight against demons of all kinds. Besides, human chakra is only, at best, half as effective on demons. Those particular ones, from their obvious stance and build, could probably crush a house with one punch. Naruto has the most experience and it's obvious he's been trained to fight them. Let him deal with this. Ibiki eyed Kakashi for a moment before nodding. I agree. Enko told me she was leaving with him and informed me that she would be specializing in fighting demons. If anyone can beat them, it's that Gaki there. Ibiki motioned to a hidden ANBU and whispered something into his ear before the ANBU shunshined away. With Naruto and Hana. True to Kakashi's observation, the last of the Dreks and Babaos were obliterated. While Hana was rather winded, Naruto was barely breathing hard. Still, they were both tired. They had been able to rely on one another and rest for very brief periods of time, so as not to push themselves over their limits. However, the constant use of techniques had left them nearly drained of chakra. Luckily, every ninja has a fallback taijutsu. Hana and Naruto stood side by side. Hana in her beast stance and Naruto in his swordmaster. The Hezrus were slightly wary of dealing with the now obvious Ryusenin. They knew what that form meant and how powerful it could be. However, these humans had destroyed their troops. That was unforgivable and demanded death of either side. The lead Hezru eyed Naruto. Shiroi and the Haimaru triplets had landed and were flanking their masters on either side. Same pairings as above. Suddenly he let out a battle cry and the 5 sergeants in the demon world charged full force at their foes. The Ninken scattered to the sides while Naruto charged and Hana quickly followed Naruto's lead. While most people would consider it suicide to stand in a Hezru's charge, Naruto was not most people, hell he wasn't even most dragons. He quickly slid under the first Hezru who followed his actions and tried to stop. He quickly realized his mistake when he felt a burning pain tear through his left arm, rendering it useless. Hana had taken advantage of his distraction and struck the Hezru's left arm. One Hezru apiece had broken off to deal with the paired Ninken. Shiroi and Haimaru were having the most luck. With Shiroi's speed, eerily similar to Naruto's own, she was able to lure the Hezru in and dodge quite easily. She had even dodged and ran up the beast's arm to promptly destroy one of its eyes. Haimaru was the power behind this team. He was easily able to attack the demon's legs and slow down the already bulky demon. They made quick work of this demon and had him beat in under a minute. Mokamaru and Kajimaru, however, did not have as much luck. While Mokamaru was faster than his siblings, he was not quite fast enough to dodge the aftershocks of the Hezuru's attacks. More than once his dragon armor saved his life, although it didn't do much to remove the pain. Kajimaru flew into a blood rage after seeing his brother knocked around for so long and promptly tore the demon to shreds with a well-placed tsuga. He whimpered afterwards at the effect it had on his body and quickly joined his brother in waiting on the sidelines and for medical assistance from their master. Naruto and Hana were faring very well. Following their distraction on the original Hezuru, Naruto had been able to slice one of the remaining 3 in half whilst Hana held off its brethren. The remaining 2 Hezuru were now very wary of their opponents. It was obvious they were blessed by the dragons and they could easily ignore the demon's strengths. The lead Hezuru whispered something to the other that the 2 humans couldn't hear. Naruto glanced at Hana out of the corner of his eye. He knew she wasn't used to this and she was probably dead tired. His attention returned fully to the demons as they charged once more. Naruto decided to opt for a defensive counter this time and held his ground while Hana stood to his left. At the last moment, the wounded Hezuru brought his left arm to bear and smacked Hana into a nearby tree with enough force to dent it. Naruto quickly dodged the slipshot attack and watched as Hana sailed through the air. His vision faded to red as he saw her slump to the ground. Now, few things could anger Naruto when he was in Valhalla. Insulting his parents or family was one and calling him weak was another. One man had made a comment about Hana. Well, he awoke at the end of the day only to be destroyed for the subsequent 20 days afterwards the second he stepped on the field. Naruto took his swordmaster stance and disappeared once again. His body was already pushed to its limits, but he didn't care at the moment. He reappeared with his sword dispersing into a swarm of golden light. He didn't even look back as the 2 demons died from serious amounts of lethal sword strikes. He slid to a stop next to Hana's body and gently shook her. "Hana-chan? Tenshi-chan? Wake up," he said, shaking her. Naruto hadn't had the time to learn the healing aspects of dragons yet, so he was forced to rely on his limited medical experience. He felt for her pulse only to feel it strong, although it did feel slightly erratic. He was about to pick her up with a hand on his shoulder stopped him. Naruto looked up to see a big-breasted, that's understating it, woman with 2 blonde pigtails. "If I gotta explain Tsunade, I'm gonna murder someone. Relax, Gaki. I'll take it from here. Go get yourself checked out with Shizune over there," she said, pointing to a black-haired woman in a kimono. Naruto nodded hesitantly before sparing a glance at the injured Hana. Shizune quickly rushed over to him and ran a diagnostic gestu. She was surprised to find only slight bruising and some overusage of muscles aside from slight chakra exhaustion. Some veterinarians were checking over the Ninken and one was doing some advanced work on Mokamaru. Naruto turned to see Hana smiling brightly at him as Tsunade quickly healed the few bruised bones she had. "Damn, you're lucky, girl. If you hadn't had that armor, you would be dead right now," Tsunade said, impressed with the armor's protective abilities. She had arrived with the ANBU only to see Hana get flung like she got hit with Tsunade's own legendary super strength. She was lucky all she had was some bruised ribs. Hana simply smiled brightly and motioned to Naruto, who quickly moved to her side. "Thanks again, Teo-kun, son." Naruto stared for a second before a smile graced his lips that quickly turned into a megawatt grin. He kissed her and she happily engaged a tongue war, earning a chuckle from the Sannin. Tsunade shook her head. "Well, you're both well enough to not go to the hospital. Take the next day or so to recover, however." They nodded and everyone turned to the purple barrier that suddenly fell and the Konoha forces cheered. To them, the invasion was over. Inside the barrier, 20 minutes ago, Ryukin had joined Sarutobi, who smiled and thanked him for the help. The two had proceeded to face off against Sarutobi's old senseis. However, even with Ryukin's help, Tobirama and Hashirama's teamwork was still impeccable. Every combo that Sarutobi and Ryukin could devise was quickly defeated and thrown back in their faces. Sarutobi dodged another water bullet just as Ryukei's joined the fight. He nodded to her and yelled to his 2 teammates, "They have tags in the back of their heads. Destroy the tags and the jutsu will disperse." The 2 dragons in human form quickly nodded and went to work. Ryukin, the master of black flames, and Ryukei's, mistress of the southern winds, were legendary for their combination attacks. Only Pit Fiends and Ryujin himself had survived their combinations. They quickly motioned to Sarutobi to aim for the tags and started one of their strongest combinations. Kurai Karyu Enden no Jutsu, Dark Fire Dragon Technique, sounded from Ryukin Wylist Ryuke's announced, Minamike's Burasutaring no Jutsu, Blistering Southern Wind Technique. They combined to form a pure black dragon twice the size of a regular jutsu with white flames randomly offshooting from the technique. The Kage's eyes widened. Hashirama quickly formed a double-layered Mokuton shield and Tobarama yelled out, Deizuinjin Hiki no Jutsu, Great Water Wall Technique. A powerful wall of water rose barely slowing the powerful fire technique before it slammed down into the Mokuton walls. Sarutobi had quickly moved to the side of his old teachers and watched as the technique did its work. These dragons were obviously as powerful as a Kage in their own rights. He saw his chance to destroy the previous Kages and took it. He launched his own Karyu Enden against them and promptly incinerated their bodies, tags included. He sighed and relaxed against one of the many trees now adorning the rooftop. They had won and the two dragons nodded to one another before shooting off to inform Sora of this win. With Sora was thoroughly pissed. No matter what he hit Minato with, he simply reformed. He was through playing around. He stood still and crossed his blade in front of himself. Bankai, Sora o Shirhai Suru, Ryujin. He said calmly. Final release, rule the skies above, Dragon God. His silver chakra flowed down his arms and into his blades. They changed slightly into two magnificent Eastern-style scimitars. They shone with silver but had golden lightning bolts arcing across the blades themselves. The guards were dragon heads that seemed to flow into the blade while the hilt was covered in a golden wrapping. He quickly made some Kage Bunshin who nodded and went on the assault. Minato was hard-pressed against 8 Soras. Unfortunately, he was able to destroy half of them before Ryukin and Ryuke's showed up behind the original. Sora, there's a tag in his head, destroy it and the jutsu will end. We helped the old WRM finish off his opponents. Ryuke said. Sora nodded. That's fine. You are dismissed. Thank you for your assistance. They nodded before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Sora quickly sent a mental command to his clones. 3 continued to attack while 1 started to run around the battlefield, seemingly at random. 1 more close was dispersed before Sora looked sadly at his friend. The 2 left fighting him quickly grabbed him and held him in place. Sorry Minato, this is the end. Suin Soryuha, Twin Dragon Strike. He brought his left sword down from its raised position to destroy Minato. Minato quit struggling and quickly Hirashined away. Sora quickly brought down his right and sent the second stream of concentrated dragon chakra at him. Minato was surprised to find a clone at the end of his jutsu and was caught unaware as the dragon slammed into his back, obliterating his body. Sora sighed. He was glad that he had that clone gather all of Minato's kunais. As he looked up, however, he was not happy with who was here. With Anko and Orochimaru. Orochimaru and Anko were evenly matched as they had been throughout all of this fight. Every ability Orochimaru sent at Anko, she quickly and efficiently countered with some type of snake or dragon attack. Anko had trained extensively with the Shadow Core, and while she wasn't as strong as her mate, she made up for it by being cunning and semi-unpredictable. She, however, did not have a weapon like Sora and Naruto. Since she was a dragon by mating, she did not have the necessary soul strength to manifest one. After her initial charge, she quickly turned it into a taijutsu fight with some supporting ninjutsus in the mix. It did not take her long to realize that Orochimaru, while no slouch in taijutsu, only held her back because of his vast ninjutsu knowledge. Still, she could not land a vital or fatal blow. Orochimaru was in the same boat. He could not land a decisive blow on Anko. He was annoyed with Sarutobi and that Ryujin. First off, Ryujin could fight the Yondaime. There goes the strongest ally he had. Secondly, he could not hurt his former apprentice and he had a sneaking suspicion that Ryujin had a hand in that. Thirdly, he summons 2 humans who proceed to overpower the first 2 Kages, thus enabling Sarutobi to destroy them. Lastly, he pulls some Kakamami attack that obliterates the Yondaime. What the fuck? Sora and Sarutobi were racing to aid Anko and Orochimaru was preparing to retreat when a deathly cold voice echoed across the rooftop. Who the hell dares to take what I have claimed? The voice said as a horned human/beast thing with a tanto in its mouth appeared behind the now visible soul of the Yondaime Hokage. Orochimaru, Anko, and Sarutobi all paled. The ANBU and the Sound Four were sweating in fear at this being. This was the Shinigami, the god of death. Sora sighed. Orochimaru did Shini-chan. He used that forbidden summoning of the second Hokage to summon all three of the old Hokages. I had planned on giving his soul to you, but would you like the honors? Sora asked. The Shinigami narrowed her eyes at Sora, but then smiled gleefully. Indeed, this is one of the souls needed for your deal, Sora. Besides that, I'm going to enjoy taking him to his rightful place. Orochimaru was paling even further. Again, is that even possible? Anko, however, was not happy. Wait a minute. I don't care who you are. His hide is mine, she said angrily. The Shinigami looked at her, then back at Sora, then back at her and proceeded to laugh loudly. Anko's anger seemed to return tenfold. Oh, I wasn't kidding. The Shinigami calmed down slightly and wiped a non-existent tear from her eye. Sora, you picked a lively one. I have seen his actions and the causes against you, Anko Mitrashur. I agree his hide is yours. I propose that you hold on to him for, 3 months. He will have no access to chakra, unable to use the cursed seals around him, and invulnerable. He can still take damage, he just can't die. After that time, I will collect him as per our agreement. Does this suit you? She asked, smiling devilishly. Anko simply smirked back. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, Shini-chan. 10 cyber cookies to whoever figures out where I got this from. The Shinigami barked out a laugh. Definitely his mate. Proposal accepted. He's all yours, Ko-chan, she said, laughing at the end. She reached out her hand and pulled something that looked like a purplish orb from Orochimaru. She smirked and waved goodbye to the humans present and faded from existence along with Minato. What, you didn't think the Shinigami would let Orochimaru summon the dead freely, huh? Orochimaru started going through hand seals, but nothing happened. He tried again, only with the same result. He started to sweat as he saw Anko approaching him. Oh, Oro-sensei, she said sing-songy like. I'm gonna enjoy carving my abuse out of your hide, she said, turning feral at the end and lunging at him. Sora sighed and grabbed her and said, Honey, why don't you take him to your forest? Just come back when you're ready. Anko quickly kissed him and grabbed Orochimaru, who was screaming in fear because apparently the Shinigami had paralyzed his body, so all he could do was piss, shit, and scream. She promptly shunshined away and silence reigned. Sora looked to the four around them and spoke out. If you drop the barrier and promise not to fight us, I promise we will let you leave unharmed. Or, should you wish it, join Konoha. They all stared at this man until they saw him look at Sarutobi, who simply nodded in agreement. They simultaneously dropped the barrier and were detained by the ANBU. The invasion of sand and sound was over. Sarutobi and Sora looked out over Konoha, and Sora smiled seeing Naruto and Hana being treated amidst the demons. Sarutobi smiled as well and said, They make a good couple. I'm glad she looks out for him. Sora chuckled. Me too, WR. Although I have a feeling that they may be more than just girlfriend and boyfriend soon, he said, smiling. Sarutobi looked at Sora a little surprised. They have only been together for a month or so. Isn't that a little fast? Sora shook his head. Dragons bond with their mates at their first meeting, WR. Aside from that, they have known each other for years now. The only reason they weren't together before was because of your counsel, he said. Sarutobi sighed. As long as they are safe. I most certainly don't need great-grandkids running around with Naruto's stamina, he said, actually slightly afraid. Sora chuckled and replied, You better start threatening some then. She wants grandpups soon, and I wouldn't put it past her to push them into Hana's room and not let them out for a few days. Sarutobi paled and said, I'll be in the office. I gotta pass a new law forbidding Naruto from sexual relations. This prompted a stare between the two until they busted out laughing. In any case, I want you and Naruto in the office tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. It concerns Naruto's heritage and parents. Sora nodded and they both disappeared to their respective jobs. With Naruto and Hana. After their dismissal from Tsunade, the two lovers decided to go to the Inuzuka compound. They arrived just as the majority of the clan returned. Silently, everyone filed inside and went to their respective houses. An hour of silence amongst the compound for the dead was spent. Once it was over, however, the Ninken and Inuzukas started to gather in the yard. Every family brought pieces of meat or food to add to the family-wide barbecue. Sora arrived and smiled seeing Hana clinging to Naruto's arm and Naruto happily chatting, with a few of the other ninjas about a few of his abilities. Surprisingly, Sora noticed Shiroi brush her tail over Akamaru's nose and head off to a quieter corner of the celebration and lay down with both of them curled next to one another. Naruto looked up to see Sora and waved with his free hand. "Aniki, over here." Sora chuckled and sat down next to him. "I see you have an ornament there, Naruto," Sora said, teasing his Otudo. Naruto and Hana blushed slightly, but Hana was the one to respond. "He's my plushie. I'll let go when he stops breathing," she said playfully. Naruto just smirked. "Fine by me, besides I love having Tenchi-chan on my arm. Makes it easy to do this," he said before he quickly grabbed her and spun her onto his lap before making out with her. There were catcalls and whistling, even a "take it to Hana's room and don't come out" from some. Hana promptly pulled back and blushed crimson before screeching, "MOM." The family simply laughed and went back to eating. Apparently, they had all accepted Naruto. If they weren't nice to him, at least they were apathetic. Sora chuckled and turned to Naruto. "WRM wants us in the office tomorrow morning at 9. It concerns something about your parents." Naruto nodded and looked at Hana. "You want to join us, Tenchi-chan?" Hana was a little surprised and asked, "You want me to be there, Teo-kun?" Naruto nodded furiously. "Of course. You're gonna find out anyway. If you want to be there, you're more than welcome to come." Hana smiled and kissed him. "Sure, I'll be there. But..." She brought her legs around to straddle him and whispered into his ear, "I'm staying at your house tonight." Naruto blushed crimson and nodded before he waved to the Inuzukas. "Soragata Gobi." The couple promptly disappeared in a shunshin. The Inuzukas roared with laughter and Tsum said, "That's my girl." Sora chuckled and headed to Anko's house. Didn't want to interrupt Naruto and Hana anyways. Naruto's house, Namake's estates. When they reappeared in front of the estates, Hana took in the sight. It wasn't large, more like a large house. It had a ground floor with a large living room, kitchen, and private onsen. The second floor had 4 rooms and the master bedroom. The top floor, however, was a large dojo with seals to reinforce the walls against attacks. They had a basement which was the Namake's jutsu vault and library. She smiled seeing Naruto standing in the doorway and patted a scroll she brought with her. She wasn't going to jump him tonight. However, she had no intention of waiting much longer. Naruto smiled at her and motioned for her to come in. "Listen, why don't we soak in the onsen then hit the sack? I'm sure you're tired as it is," Naruto said. Hana smirked. She had brought a bathing suit, but Naruto didn't know that. "I didn't know you were so eager to get me naked, Teo-kun. You sure you haven't become a pervert since you left?" she said teasingly. Naruto frowned. "I meant nothing of the sort. You're mean," he said, catching on to her teasing and causing her to bust out laughing. She chuckled and replied, "Yes, that's fine, Naruto-kun. I'll join you in a minute, K." Naruto nodded and headed to the master bedroom. He emerged a minute later in his own swim trunks and headed downstairs. Hana smirked and snuck into his room. She noticed the dresser he took and the free one on the opposite wall. She quickly unsealed and put up many of her more comfortable sets of her clothing. She slipped on her bikini and headed downstairs. Naruto turned as he heard the door open. "Hana, what took you so long?" His voice trailed off as he saw Hana in nothing but her bikini. Her breasts seemed to have grown slightly since 4 months ago. They were almost a D-cup and were straining the slightly old bikini top. Her hair flowed around her face, framing it perfectly, and she brought her hand up to hide her smirk before chuckling into it that made Naruto think, "So cute." Hana smirked, seeing that his eyes never left her upper body. "See something you like, Teo?" she asked, only slightly teasing. Naruto blushed at being caught but responded, "Only if I'm allowed to look, Tenchi." Hana smiled at his response. At least he asked permission. "Of course. I wouldn't have walked in here if you couldn't," she said, slipping into the hot springs and relaxing thoroughly under the hot water. Naruto smiled but was still blushing slightly as he got out of the water. She eyed him for a minute before he sat down behind her and started to massage her shoulders and neck. She moaned slightly and Naruto attacked the kinks in her neck. She relaxed and said, "You're pretty good at this. You had experience before?" Naruto shook his head. "Nah, I just keep gently kneading the muscles until they relax. My mom seemed to like it." Hana smiled and motioned for the soap. She quickly cleaned her elf and let Naruto wash her back. They exited the onsen and went into the master bedroom. Naruto grabbed some clothes and went into the bathroom there. Hana smirked and opened her drawer. She pulled out a silky black lace two-piece lingerie. She quickly dried off and slipped the two-piece on before laying on the bed. She propped herself up on her side and crossed her legs so he would barely be able to see her nether regions, although he would get an eyeful of her legs. Naruto stepped out of the bathroom, not expecting a hot Hana Inuzuka to be occupying his bed. He froze and his eyes started at her feet. Her body wasn't free of scars, but the few she did have did nothing to take away from her beauty. His eyes traveled up her slender, well-toned legs to the dark area where they connected, and he gulped. Up the thin stomach to her impressive bust and onto her beautiful face that held a sexy smirk. "While I love seeing you appreciate what I've got," Hana said, snapping Naruto out of his gaze. "I'm rather tired and I want my plushie," she said, slightly childish, before putting a finger to her mouth. Naruto blushed crimson and nodded dumbly before joining her. He quickly laid down and turned so his back was pressed against her body, and she wrapped her arm around his waist and neck. "Night, Teo-kun," Hana said before kissing him on the cheek and snuggling under the blankets with him. Naruto's smile threatened to split his face when he responded with a quiet, "Night, Tenshi-chan," before he snuggled down and fell asleep. A night to remember. We find ourselves in the deepest part of the Forest of Death, aka Training Ground 44. Shrieks of pure pain and incoherent squells of torture sound throughout the area. The animals have long since fled from the deranged laughs of the one who inflicts this pain. The indescribable scene upon which we come is quite gruesome. The man's intestines are splayed across the ground in front of him, along with various other organs. Each of his ribs and the subsequent bones connected to them are cracked and broken beyond repair. His eyes are bloodshot and dry, whilst his face is gaunt with pain and agony. His vocal cords are visible and his neck is at an unnatural angle. The last thing you see is the man's shriveled, object on the floor. This torture is beyond anything anyone could possibly endure and something that no one should have to. Oh, who are we kidding? Of course he deserves it. If you haven't guessed yet, this man is Orochimaru, one of the Dansetsu no Sannin and, arguably, the strongest as well. However, after the events of the day prior, he became the personal torture toy of one Anko Mitarashi, mate to Ryujin. Anko was currently watching as Orochimaru slowly healed. Apparently, the Shinigami had left a seal on Orochimaru to heal him fully anytime chakra was inserted into it. Anko had plenty of fun destroying his organs and healing him afterwards. Now, however, she had her fill of his pain and would leave him pinned to the tree to heal slowly while she went and congratulated her husband for having such a good repo-wire with the Shinigami. Sora had stopped by and explained that he had met with Shinigami about this deal before Sora gave the soul to the Shinigami. Well, that gained major points in both of the girls' books. Yes, Shinigami is female. Anko sighed and visibly checked the kunai and ninja wire wrapped around Orochimaru before sunshining to the Hokage's office. After all, they had a meeting to go to. They could have their fun afterwards. Namikaze Estates, 6:30 a.m. Naruto and Hana had awoken to find themselves pleasantly intertwined. After a half hour of cuddling, Hana had been the one to remind Naruto of the meeting he had today. Naruto had sighed and gotten out of bed and promptly changed into his usual attire. He had turned around only to find Hana riffling through the other dresser's drawers. Hana-chan, I'm not sure anything in there will fit you. Actually, how are there clothes in there? I didn't. Naruto said, his voice trailing off as he saw Hana smirk. Hope you don't mind, Naruto-kun, but I claimed the dresser as mine, she said until her face turned into a frown. That is unless you don't want me to have some drawers in here? Naruto shook his head quickly. No, I'd be happy to let you use those drawers. They're all yours, Tenshi-chan. I hope this means what I think it means, he thought. Hana smirked. Perfect. Step 1 complete. Step 2. Strip him down and ride him until you're hoarse. Quiet you. Great. Thanks, Teo-kun, she said, smiling. Naruto was a little worried. While he liked having Hana in his bed, he didn't want her moving just yet. He had one more thing to change before he asked her for that. Hey, Hana-chan? Naruto said. Hana turned just as she was finished getting her clothes on. Yes, Naruto-kun? She asked. You didn't put all your clothes in here yet, huh? He asked. Hana shook her head but was a little anxious. No, why do you ask? She replied. Naruto smirked. Well, when we go on that date later this week, I want to be able to surprise you, and I won't be able to do that if you're here now, can I? He said. Hana chuckled and inwardly dismissed her anxiety. Well, how about Friday? That's at the end of the week, and I'm sure most places will be back up because only 5 buildings were damaged in the attack, thanks to Jiraiya-sama and you, of course. A little unrealistic, I know, but I made sure that all threats were promptly disposed of before they reached deep into the city. Naruto nodded. Friday, it is Tenshi-chan. Now we have a meeting to attend. Hana nodded and stepped next to her boyfriend and took his arm. They both disappeared in a flash of golden lightning. Hokage's office, 7 a.m. Sarutobi, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune were all waiting for Naruto and his friends to arrive. Tsunade was deeply worried that Naruto wouldn't forgive her. Shizune was stealing glances at her sensei and wishing her the best of luck, while Jiraiya was sure that the kid would understand his reasonings. After all, the kid loved Konoha. Sora and Anko both shunshined into the room, one in a silver lighting bolt and the other in a purplish gas. When they took in the room, they didn't even say hi. They knew what this was about. Just before Jiraiya opened his mouth, a golden flash flared in the room and died away to reveal Naruto and Hana. Yo Gigi, Naruto said really brightly. Tsunade and Shizune were unsurprised to see the man with Hana. He was pretty protective of her on the battlefield after all. Jiraiya, on the other hand, well, he's a super pervert, so I can't vouch for what was going through his mind. Sora, Anko, and Sarutobi simply smiled at seeing the two lovebirds together. Good morning, Naruto. How are you? Sarutobi asked. Never better, Aji-san. So what was so important I had to get up and come to the office this early? Naruto asked. Straight to the point then, huh? Sarutobi asked. Naruto simply nodded and Sarutobi motioned to take a seat. Naruto sat down with Hana in the chair next to him. Naruto had quickly took in the people surrounding the office and was mentally frowning at where this meeting was going. Naruto, I would like for you to listen fully to these people here. I assume Sora gave you your parents' scrolls, correct? After a nod from both Sora and Naruto, Sarutobi continued. These two people are Tsunade Senju and Jiraiya of the Sannin. Tsunade stepped forward, only slightly hesitant. Naruto, we are your godparents. Before you go hating us, please listen to what we have to say. I don't know about the pervert over here, but I am sorry I wasn't here for you. Naruto looked her right in the eyes and kept silent, his eyes almost begging for an answer. After the Kyuubi's attack, I was crying over Kushina's body and had just proclaimed her dead. I don't remember how long it was before a group of ANBU with the northeast symbol on their heads appeared in front of me and told me her son had died from the influx of Kyuubi's chakra. I was grief-stricken. First, my brother and lover died defending Konoha, then Minato and Kushina, and now a child not even a day old? Couldn't bear it. I didn't even wait to get a full story, and it has cost me dearly. I quickly told Shizune to pack everything and we left before dawn the next day. It wasn't until Sarutobi-sensei set up a poker tournament that I came back to Konoha and, when he beat me, did I find out the true story. She was heartfelt the entire talk and several times she failed to meet his eyes. Shizune was watching with hopeful eyes that Naruto would forgive her sensei and give her a chance. Hana was silently watching Naruto. She could see the telltale signs of him being both hurt and relieved at the information. She silently prayed he was more relieved than hurt. Sora and Anko shared a look that spoke volumes of how much they wanted to kill Danzo at the moment. Sarutobi was silently gazing at Naruto, trying to decipher him much like Hana, while Jiraiya was sorta hoping he wouldn't have to speak. Naruto simply turned his gaze to Jiraiya as if to say, "It's your turn." Tsunade almost flinched but looked down and started to leave the office. Naruto's hand reached out and caught her arm, stopping her. He glanced at her and then returned his gaze to Jiraiya. Naruto couldn't trust his voice right now, so he was staying silent. Tsunade stepped back to her spot near Shizune and everyone turned to Jiraiya. Jiraiya sighed and said, "I knew you were alive, kid. I had hoped that the people would respect Minato's wishes, but apparently, that wasn't the case. I couldn't stay in the village because I had to maintain my spy network, which is crucial to Konoha's survival. I couldn't very well take a baby along for those types of missions, and most of them wouldn't have allowed you even as a child. I still sent presents for your birthday though, and I was supposed to let you sign the Toad contract and teach you the Rasengan when you reached the appropriate level of skill." Sora, Anko, and Hana were all severely disappointed in that answer. At least Tsunade had been tricked, even if it was a major blunder on her part. Shizune was unhappy, as was Tsunade, but they had heard the flimsy excuse before. "So you mean to tell me You abandoned me in this hellhole for 12 years because of a spy network? Naruto asked, his arms shaking slightly. Jiraiya sighed again and replied, "It was necessary for Konoha's survival, Naruto. Surely you understand." "Oh, I understand, all right," Naruto said loudly. "You abandoned me so you could run from the death of your prize student. You left me to rot in squalor and hatred because you couldn't bear that Toussaint was dead. Your excuse is flimsy, Kyuubi. I could see through it a mile away. As for the Rasengan and Toad summonings, I never would have been able to master the first because I was never trained until Aniki came along. The second is useless in almost every battle except against another summoner. You could have earned my trust back had you not lied straight to my face. Don't ever expect me to like you, Jiraiya-san, because I assure you, it will not happen," Naruto said, glaring directly at Jiraiya. Shizune and Tsunade were shocked at the scathing reprisal, while Sarutobi was frowning because Naruto had him pegged completely correct. Many times had the Sandaime asked Jiraiya to take Naruto and he had refused. Sora and Anko were actually smirking slightly. They were happy to see Naruto tear apart the man who should have been taking care of Naruto's innocence and well-being but instead had run gallivanting off into Kami knows where. Hana was actually smiling. She was happy that Naruto was able to deal with his godfather without losing control of his emotions and just ripping the man to shreds. Naruto suddenly stood up and walked over to Jiraiya, who was slightly wary of the boy. "One last thing, Jiraiya-san," Naruto said. "My Toussaint said that you deserve a punishment for ignoring me and I was to deal it out. However, I have decided to forego that punishment." Jiraiya sighed in relief and relaxed. "Big mistake. I'll be punsaing you for peeping on Hana-chan and Ka-san instead." Naruto cocked his right leg back and quickly slammed them home into Jiraiya's balls. He kept through with his swing and launched Jiraiya out the open window, conveniently opened by Hana, and across town. The entire room was silent until Tsunade chuckled slightly and then everyone busted out laughing. It took them almost 2 whole minutes to calm down and Tsunade wiped a tear from her eye. "You most certainly are Kushina's son, Naruto," she said. "I know. I loved playing pranks on everyone with her when we visited Valhalla," he said. Tsunade, Shizune, Hana, and Sarutobi went bug-eyed. You met your mom?" Tsunade asked. Naruto nodded. "During my training, I spent 2 years in Valhalla just fighting. Met my mom, dad, and quite a few other people too." Sarutobi just shook his head while the other 3 tried to wrap their heads around it, although Hana had an easier time. "Tsunade," Naruto said. Everyone looked at Naruto, who was staring her straight in the eyes. "I can forgive you because of your grief. I understand it must have hurt. I cannot understand how much because I have never had a family member torn from me. Despite that, I cannot understand why it took you 13 years to return," he said rather harshly. Shizune spoke up, trying to defend her sensei. "You just said that you can't understand her pain. She had a right." "Bullshit," Naruto said, glaring at Shizune. If it had been anyone other than a Sannin, she'd have been marked a missing nin and dragged back here by her hair. Her station is admirable, yes. She is a drunk and a gambler to try and drown her sorrows. Her pain is heavy, but what about the other ninjas who have lost the same and never ran?" He looked at Tsunade, who was taking this quite hard and was ready to punch her godson's lights out. "What of Dan and Nawaki? What would they say if they saw you like this?" he asked seriously. That made Tsunade pause. She hadn't even thought about her brother and lover since that day 13 years ago. Could this boy be right? Would they be ashamed of her for her actions against Konoha? She had returned, but only for a time. She shook those thoughts away and turned her glare to Naruto. "Where do you get off? You didn't know them and you most certainly don't know me," she said angrily. Naruto narrowed his eyes. "No, I don't know you. However, Nawaki and Dan were in Valhalla. They often talked about how you must have followed their dreams since they were unable to fulfill them. Were they wrong to place their dreams on you?" he asked. Everyone in the room was stunned, to say the least. Sora and Anko had not been around all the time and had not heard of these discussions. Hana and Shizune were both rather shocked that Naruto was speaking to Tsunade like he was scolding a child. Sarutobi was inwardly happy because his student was getting the reality check she needed. Tsunade stuttered for a few seconds before getting out. "They wanted me to be Hokage?" she whispered. Naruto nodded seriously. "More than anyone. They knew if you were Hokage that no one would dare mess with, and I quote, the most beautiful and talented hothead medic nin of our time," he replied. Tsunade bit her lower lip and went back into deep contemplation. Naruto sighed. Listen, take your time. I'll be here when you're ready and I would like to get to know you. He got a nod from Tsunade and he smirked. I hope that genjutsu lasts, Oba-chan, because I don't think I could get used to seeing you all wrinkly. That remark earned him a tick mark from Tsunade along with a gaki and laughter from the assembled room. However, it did the job as everyone was smiling. Sarutobi cleared his throat. Well, since that's over, I'd like to congratulate Naruto Namikaze for his battlefield promotion to Chunin. Naruto and Hana beamed with pride. Tsunade smirked and Shizen had a soft smile. Sora and Anko were smiling happily seeing their favorite knucklehead get his promotion. To be clear, I'd promote you to Jounin with all the training and experience, but even I couldn't ignore the backlash from the council if I did that. Naruto nodded, but Sora spoke up. WYRM. I'd like to take Naruto, myself, Anko, and Hana out to hunt down Akatsuki members Kakazu, Haiden, and Madara. Sarutobi's eyes widened. You really think they are ready? Sora nodded. The only one we need to train is Hana, but she's inventive enough on her own. She's more of a backup and a healer for us. I know she doesn't have many human jutsus, but... He looked at Tsunade. Tsunade smirked and said, You sure I'll train the brat's girlfriend? If she's already got the basics, it shouldn't be too hard to get the more advanced things down. Hana's eyes widened. Are you serious? She asked Tsunade. Tsunade smirked. Of course, I can't have my godson going out gallivanting without a medic. With that stunt you two pulled at the gates, you're likely to get killed. Naruto chuckled sheepishly. Sorry, I haven't gotten to the healing parts of dragon training just yet. It doesn't suit my style, so it's low on the list. Tsunade nodded. It'll take about 2 months. Think you can wait that long? She asked, looking at Sora. He nodded and said, Yeah, in the meantime, Naruto, I want you to train her in evasion and speed. Don't worry about strength for now. Me and Anko will be tracking and hunting the non-immortal members of Akatsuki, namely Deidara, Sasori, and Zetsu. Sarutobi nodded. Consider it done. I'll pay Hana and Naruto for a 2-month training trip and take them off of the active duty roster. Tsunade, please take care of the hospital along with Shizun. Sora, I can't pay you, but Anko will be receiving a rank mission pay along with the bounties, so I'm sure that will be enough. Everyone nodded in agreement. Good, then you're all dismissed. I have to fight this paperwork, he said, glaring at the paperwork that seemed to pop up on his desk out of nowhere. Naruto chuckled. Neaji-san, I know the secret to defeating paperwork. Sarutobi's eyes widened to a comical scale before he was on his knees in front of Naruto faster than the Hiraishin. Please, please, please tell me, oh wise one. I'll do anything, he said. Naruto smirked. 2 times that I can call on you for anything and you will comply. Sarutobi was back at his desk and wrote out 2 Sarutobi Ozu slips and handed them to Naruto. He smirked and said, 2 words, Aji-san. Kage Bunshin. The room was deathly silent until Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure, and the Kami no Shinobi started hitting his head on the desk saying, Stupid, 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 stupid. Everyone sweat dropped and quickly left the scene. Once outside the office, Tsunade turned to Hana. You're coming with me, we are beginning right now. Your physical training starts tomorrow before lunch, and after lunch is medic training except Friday and Saturday, which are rest days, understood. Hana nodded and Naruto nodded behind her, agreeing to the schedule. Naruto stepped up to Hana and smirked before kissing her chastely on the lips. Have a good day, Tenshi-chan. I'll see you at home? He asked hopefully. Hana smirked. Only if I get steak when I get there. Naruto smiled and nodded before he was kissed again, and the 3 medics walked off. Naruto turned to Sora and Anko. So I guess you'll be going? They nodded and Sora spoke up. Listen, Naruto, Itachi and Kisame should be heading here. You know how the dragons like to randomly pop in and survey the land? Well, they spotted those 2 closing in. It'll take them about 2 weeks at their current speed and approach. Be careful, okay? Naruto nodded. You got it, Aniki. I'll take out Kisame fast because he's the muscle. Doesn't mean that Itachi's gonna be easier, just that Kisame is a worse matchup for me. Anko and Sora smirked. Kamen Rukan, I want to drag Oro team and throw him in front of the Akatsuki and see them beat him up, she said gleefully. Hi Hibiheim, Sora said, and they disappeared in a silver flash. Naruto smirked and shook his head before he headed back into the Sandaime's office, only to catch him reading Ika Ika with his clones doing all the work. Sarutobi noticed Naruto and quickly put away his book before turning to him. Yes, Naruto? What can I do for you? Naruto smiled and held up one of the slips of paper. I need a certain bed made and I'm sure you can help me. Time skip, 3 days. Namake's estates, 10 a.m. Naruto had been doing non-stop D-rank missions with his clones to help as many people as possible while his real self trained with Hana. He was glad that most people seemed at least apathetic towards him nowadays. The shinobi were actually quite nice and many had offered apologies for past behavior which he shrugged off in return for a, I won't do it again. This had a very positive effect on his reputation. Hana had spent every night here completely wiped out from her training. Naruto was no slouch in forcing her to dodge and Tsunade had already made her memorize and learn the medical jutsu to stop and heal a deep puncturing wound. I have no idea what real medicine is so I'm just gonna explain the medic jutsus like this. Sorry in advance. Hana woke up to find herself, once again, intertwined with Naruto. It seemed ever since he returned that they just couldn't get enough of being near one another. They had taken to eating lunch together like before the exams and they were happy. She smiled and cuddled up to Naruto a little more who chuckled. Good morning, Tenshi-chan, he said. Good morning, Teo-kun. What's on the agenda for today? She asked, although she refused to move. We got training, so we need to get up, Hana-chan. Noticing the look on her face when she looked at him, he stopped her in her tracks. I don't want to move either, but you need the training. Please don't fight me, he said. Hana pouted slightly and looked him in the eye. Fine, she said exasperatingly. But you owe me barbecue for lunch, she said smirking. Naruto chuckled. Hi, let's go, okay? Hana nodded, but there was a knock on the front door. Naruto scrunched his face. I'll get that, you get dressed. Naruto quickly threw on some pants and went to answer the door. He opened it to see an ANBU standing there. Naruto Uzumaki, you have been summoned by the Council of Konoha, he stated. There is no Uzumaki at this residence ANBU. Please tell the council that Naruto Namikaze does not like being disturbed with useless summons. Naruto said before he slammed the door in his face. The ANBU seemed to blink before he disappeared. Naruto quickly made a Kage Bunshin who hinged into a small table and plant before he headed upstairs. Naruto, who was that? Hana asked, coming out in her training outfit, just some sweats and sandals. Naruto sighed. You may want to get dressed in something better. I have a feeling the council will force that ANBU to come back, he said while getting dressed in his usual attire. Hana nodded and quickly changed. Just as they were finished, an incessant knocking at the door made them look at each other and Naruto once again opened the door. Unfortunately, the ANBU brought a squad of friends. Naruto Uzumaki, the Council of Konoha has summoned you. Please comply or you will be detained and brought in for questioning, the ANBU stated once more. Naruto and Hana both glared at him. I told you before, there is no Naruto Uzumaki at this house. I do not appreciate that the council refuses to acknowledge that. I will come with you, but if you so much as make a wrong move in my direction, he focused his KI on them, then don't expect me to go easy. They nodded and were only slightly intimidated, but Naruto got his point across. He took Hana's hand and disappeared in a golden lightning bolt. The ANBU quickly shunshined away. None of them noticed the extra leaves on the ground. Council chambers, 10:15 a.m. The council was annoyed to say the least. First, they had summoned the demon brat to demand that he hand over the dragon summoning scroll and training to Sasuke, who had never asked for this to begin with. Then, they find him living in the Yandame's house and were going to kick him out. Finally, he had the audacity to decline a summons from them claiming that he was a Namikaze. Oh, the civilians were not happy. Sume, Shikaku, and Shibi were quietly watching, actually amused at the idiots digging their own graves, especially since the Hokage wasn't here right now. Naruto and Hana arrived in grand style. In a flash of gold, eerily similar to the Yandame's famous Hiraishin, they stood in the center of the room. Naruto stepped forward. Now I am here to lodge a complaint against this council, he said. You have been sending an ANBU to my home and asking for a Naruto Uzumaki, who does not reside at my home, and demanding that I come to a meeting that obviously has nothing to do with me, Naruto Namikaze. The jaws of the civilian council dropped. The ninja council, privy to the secrets of his heritage, were inwardly chuckling. Satsumi Haruno stood up screeching, You are Naruto Uzumaki, demon brat. The Yandame never had any children and most certainly wouldn't have a demon for a child. Naruto's eyes hardened. You do know that the Sandame's law is still in effect, correct, Haruno-san? I suggest you watch your mouth before someone enforces that law. Satsumi looked enraged but barely held her tongue. I am curious, however. Why is this council in session without its Hokage? He asked. Why indeed, Naruto-kun? An aged voice came from the entrance. Sarutobi, Tsunade, Shizune, and a clone of Naruto walked in. The clone smiled and waved before disappearing in a puff of smoke. The civilians were, once again, sweating bullets. Both Tsunade and the Kami no Shinobi? They couldn't bully the kid now. Hamura stood up and spoke to the Hokage who had taken his seat. We are here because Naruto Uzumaki has taken residence at the Yandame's house. It is well known that he had no children, so why is Uzumaki-san being allowed to enter and take up residence there? Sarutobi sighed. Doesn't anyone read the decrees I send out anymore? I sent one to every member of the council informing them of Naruto Namake's promotion and claiming of his heritage. He said forcefully. Satsumi screeched again. He can't be the Yandame's son. He is just a de. She found herself dangerously close to becoming a shish kebab by Naruto's sword. Finish that sentence, Haruno. I took enough abuse from your daughter and I'm sure you're the cause for that. I'd be happy to enforce Sarutobi-ji-san's law, he said coldly. Now Naruto-kun, that's enough, Sarutobi said, although inwardly he was cheering for him. Naruto nodded and jumped back to his place near Hana. If you don't believe it, check the medical reports I, myself, have run on his blood. It is a 90% match to the Yandame's. Naruto is obviously related to him, Tsunade said, handing out many copies of the report. Danzo took one look at it and frowned before turning to Sarutobi. If we had known his heritage, he could have been molded into an even greater weapon. With the Yandame's techniques and the Kyuubi's chakra, the boy would be unstoppable, he said, angry at losing such a tool. Naruto frowned. Kyuubi's gone, you one-eye freak. I'm the only one standing here, he said. That threw the council for a loop. A random civilian jumped up and screamed, You're the Kyuubi. He can't be gone. We should have killed you before you got this. URK. He never got to finish the sentence because his head was impaled on the sword of an ANBU. Sarutobi sighed. It is true. Naruto here had such a strong soul that the Kyuubi couldn't die with him, so Naruto cut him a deal. In return for his promise on his own life to never return to Konoha or the Land of Fire for the next 1,000 years, he would be returned to Makai and leave Naruto with a large amount of chakra and a fighting style. Sarutobi said. Not entirely untrue but close enough. He thought. The council gaped. Kyuubi was gone. Danzo spoke up once again. If that is the case, then I propose that we celebrate the Kyuubi's banishment and the hero who brought us this victory. In addition, we should put him under the CRA. We cannot allow such an important clan to wither and die. If I can get some leverage on him from his wives or children, then maybe I can get the Yandame's techniques, he thought. Naruto denied it vehemently. I don't want that. I refuse to marry multiple women. I have a woman I love, and I refuse to force her to accept someone else into our relationship, he said forcefully. Hana smiled hearing what he said along with Tsunade, Shizune, and Sarutobi. Sarutobi looked at Danzo and replied, You heard him. Besides, the CRA is for people with Kekkei Genkai, which Naruto does not have. Inwardly Danzo cursed. I am glad, however, to announce that I will be stepping down from my Soshin as Hokage in the coming week. On Monday, I will announce our new Hokage to the village. The council looked stunned once more. Who could take the position? Was the thought on many minds. Troublesome. May I assume Lady Tsunade will take your place? Shikaku drawled out. Sarutobi chuckled and nodded. Indeed, Tsunade Senju will be the Godame Hokage on Monday. The council cheered for her, but many were inwardly seething. Tsunade was known for her bullheadedness and her short temper. They wouldn't be able to manipulate her like they could the aged Sarutobi. Amidst the cheering, Naruto and Hana slipped out, unnoticed by all save a few. Once outside, Naruto and Hana shunshin to a barbecue joint and sat down to eat. They ate mostly in silence until Hana looked at Naruto and said, Did you mean what you said back there? Naruto cocked his head to the said, Mean what, Hana-chan? Hana stared into his eyes. Did you mean what you said when you said you loved me? She asked, slightly scared and anxious. She loved him. Hell, the month apart from him was torture after spending every day of 2 months with him. She knew it, but she wanted to know if he really felt the same. Naruto smiled softly and grabbed her hands. Of course I did. Why would I lie about something like that? Hana smiled brightly and had tears shimmering in her eyes. She gently leaned forward and kissed him. Naruto was in heaven. While they didn't engage in a tongue war, the kiss was magnetic and neither wanted to pull away. When the need for air became too much to handle, they broke apart panting slightly. I gotta go, Naruto-kun. I'll see you tonight, she asked. Naruto nodded. Of course, see ya then, he said brightly as she slid out of the booth and out the door. Naruto couldn't wait for Friday. Only 2 more days, he thought. Friday, 8 a.m., Namikaze Estates. Naruto had woken early and sent a clone off to ask Kurenai for a favor. He needed Hana out of the house for most of the day and he knew Kurenai would be happy to help. He smiled softly and started running his fingers through her hair. Today was going to be a good day. He could just feel it. Hana stirred and turned her head to face Naruto's. She smiled and said, "Good morning, Teo-kun." Naruto just smiled back and replied, "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Hana nodded on his chest and said, "Yeah, although the bed just doesn't feel." Her voice trailed off as she looked for the right word. "Homie?" Naruto asked with a smirk. "Yeah, that's it. I still like waking up to you running your hands through my hair, so don't stop," she said slightly childish at the end. Naruto chuckled and got the memories of his Kage Bunshin. "Listen, Tenshi-chan, why don't you go out and have fun with your friends today? My treat." Hana frowned playfully and said, "Are you trying to get rid of me, Naruto-kun?" Naruto shook his head swiftly. "Not at all. I just assumed that you would want to be pampered for your date tonight. I even got you and your friends full-day massages." He held up 3 tickets to the Konoha Springs and Hana's eyes widened and took on the shapes of stars. "Phew, what, if you don't want them?" He didn't get to finish as Hana grabbed the tickets and disappeared into the bathroom. Naruto chuckled and kissed Hana as she flew out of the bathroom and down the stairs to get her friends. He was still amazed that she could move so fast when properly motivated. He was glad that Kurenai had agreed to help him. After all, he didn't want to ruin the surprise, so he planned her day with 2 major activities that every woman loves, namely spas and shopping. Most of the morning would be spent at the hot springs and spa, while Kurenai would take Hana shopping in the afternoon. That gave Naruto plenty of time to set up his house for tonight. Naruto quickly got dressed and headed downstairs waiting for the people he hired today. When the doorbell rang, Naruto opened it and smiled, seeing exactly what he wanted. "Ah, good boys, bring it right in and let's get to work," Naruto said. Lunch, noon, barbecue joint. Hana, Kurenai, Shizune, and Yugao were relaxing after that wonderful trip to the spa. Kurenai had rounded up the other 2 girls and explained that Naruto had a surprise for Hana and she needed to be kept busy. Both girls had agreed, besides they got spa treatments out of it. The girls spent most of the lunch in silence until Shizune couldn't stand it anymore. She looked at Hana and said, "So, how did you and Naruto meet?" Hana smiled softly and replied, "Well, he would always bring in these wounded animals to the clinic. It was probably when he was around 5. He brought in a wounded baby bird. He was holding it so gently. I was only able to watch or clean the kennels and rooms at the time, but I still remember the look of fear on his face. He was scared for the little bird. I knew that people called him a bad boy, but after seeing that I knew it was a bunch of hogwash. So, as he kept up the trend, I got to see him more and more. Eventually I started treating them and he would just talk to me about anything. He never asked me for anything except to heal the animals, but that was my job. He always looked so happy to see the animal healed once again. He has a heart of gold and don't let anyone tell you different." Shizune smiled softly. "I can tell you really care for him, huh?" Hana nodded. Kurenai chuckled and said, "Well then I think you need something to knock him dead." Hana sputtered for a moment. "I have plenty of clothes to knock him dead, Kurenai," she said. Yugao sighed. "Honey, you need to knock him dead. You keep having that look in your eyes that I get when I want to spend a night with Hayate-kun," she said, looking Hana right in the eye, daring her to dispute it. Note: Hayate didn't die in my version. He simply was too wounded to join in the invasion. Hana blushed a deep crimson and muttered out a "yeah, maybe." 3 girly shrieks later and the friends were off to get an outfit that would make Naruto and every other straight male drool and stare at Hana like a piece of fine meat. That night, Inuzuka Compound, 7 p.m. Hana was finished getting ready for her date. After the small shopping spree, paid for by Naruto, she was ready to knock him dead, as Yugao put it. She sighed and finished fixing her hair, then smiled at hearing the crunching of feet outside her house. She turned and looked at her clean room. Hopefully it'd stay that way because she had no intention of returning to it tonight. Naruto was beaming. His little project for his house was complete. He had finished with plenty of time to go ask Kurenai how Hana did, and he got a subtle hint that Hana had no intentions of going back to her home after tonight. Naruto was dressed in some black slacks with formal black shoes. His shirt was a simple dark red, short-sleeved button-up shirt, over which he wore a black jacket with a golden dragon coiling on the back. A lot of black, I know, so Sumi. He played with something in his pocket for a minute before refocusing himself. He marched up to the Inuzuka clan head's house and gulped slightly before knocking on the door. Just a minute sounded from the inside before a happy Tsum answered the door. "Ah, Naruto-kun. Come right in, Hana should be ready any minute," Tsum said, smiling brightly. "Thank you, Tsum-san. I'll wait for her in the living room, is that all right?" Naruto asked politely. Tsum nodded and laughed. "Sure, pup. Drop the honorifics, they make me feel old." The two made their way into the living room and Naruto took a seat at Tsum's behest. He looked nervous and kept glancing at the hall. "Relax, pup. Kiba ain't here tonight. He's out on a mission," Tsum said, trying to ease his nerves. It seemed to work, although only slightly. Naruto shook his head. "He's not the one I'm scared of. What if Hana doesn't like where we go? Will she like what I'm wearing? How can I know I didn't screw something up?" he asked. Tsum frowned. He was having first date jitters. He was still a greenhorn at the whole dating idea anyways, but that wouldn't do. "Naruto." His eyes rose to meet Tsum's. "She doesn't care where you take her. Just make sure you do what you always do. Pay attention to her. When she asks you a question, answer truthfully. Don't let your eyes wander, unless she provokes them. Be a gentleman and she will enjoy it," Tsum said calmly. That seemed to do the trick as Naruto visibly relaxed. Around the corner, Hana smiled softly and thought, "Thanks, Mom." Hana walked around the corner and said, "Hi Naruto-kun, I'm ready." His face was priceless. She was silently smirking as his eyes traveled across her form. She was wearing a beautiful deep forest green, shoulderless dress that hugged her body perfectly, with slits at her hip so she could move her legs freely. Her shoes with a pair of low-heeled brown sandals that flowed into her dress, complementing them. Around her neck was a silver necklace with a golden claw on it. Her lips were free of lipstick, although her eyes had only a slight amount of mascara and a deep green eyeliner that complemented her brown eyes beautifully. Her hair was let down to cascade around her face like a waterfall. All in all, she had an earthy look to her that brought out her natural endowments rather well. She walked over to Naruto and put a finger under his chin and closed it, saying, "I'm glad you like it so much, but I am rather hungry." Naruto shook his head and said, "Sorry, you look breathtaking, Tenshi-chan." Hana blushed slightly and replied, "You don't look half bad yourself, Teo-kun." A flash of light and the two lovebirds looked to see Tsum standing there with a grin and a camera. "That was good. Now if you strip and I get a few shots of that." Hana went beet red. Tsum smiled and winked at Naruto, who quickly grabbed Hana and went out the door before more teasing could occur. Dragon of the Leaf, 7:15 p.m. Naruto and Hana had walked hand in hand all the way to the Dragon of the Leaf. It was one of the best restaurants around, not to mention it served Hana's favorite dish, steak with a side of chicken shish kebabs. "I apologize in advance, I have no training in Japanese foods." They stopped outside the restaurant and Hana looked at Naruto. "Here?" she asked. Naruto nodded and dragged Hana inside. They walked up to the maitre d' and Naruto spoke up. "Two for namekes?" he asked. The maitre d' looked at him and barely repressed a scowl. Unfortunately, he had orders from the restaurant manager to allow them to pass. Naruto had anticipated people's dislike of him and had paid extra to get a private booth and a special service so that he would be able to enjoy his date with Hana. "Yes, right this way, please," he ground out as he took them to a secluded booth. "Your waiter will be with you momentarily." Naruto and Hana nodded to the man and took their menus. Hana's eyes lit up at seeing her favorite dish and she looked at Naruto, who was smirking slightly. She bent over the table, giving him a nice view of her cleavage, and pecked him on the lips. "Good choice, Naruto-kun." Naruto smiled and replied, "Glad you liked it, Hana-chan. The waiter arrived soon after and took their drink orders of sweet tea for the both of them. Naruto kept looking over the list of items, eventually settling for some sushi. When the waiter came back, they quickly placed their orders and made some small talk. Mostly talk of the training that Tsunade was doing with Hana. Their food arrived rather quickly and they dug in. The food was delicious. Hana was smiling appreciatively, thinking that Naruto had picked the place especially for her, seeing as this place didn't serve ramen. She smirked softly as she watched Naruto finish off his sushi. It wasn't his favorite dish, but he had taken a liking to it ever since she had made him try some. "Naruto-kun, thanks for the dinner. It was wonderful," she said. Naruto smiled. "Glad you enjoyed it, Tenshi-chan," he replied. Hana let a bit of her sexy side out and said, "So did you have any other activities planned for tonight?" Naruto took a mock-thinking pose and watched Hana out of the corner of his eyes as she stared at him. "I dunno. I was hoping a beautiful lady would accompany me to my favorite spot in the village, but I don't see any," he said, only slightly teasing. Hana deflated a bit. "So he doesn't think I'm beautiful, huh?" Naruto smirked. "I guess I'll just have to settle for the hottest angel in the village instead," he continued. Hana's eyes sparkled and her cheeks went flush at the compliment. "You sure you don't want a beautiful lady to accompany you?" she said teasingly. Naruto chuckled. "Nah, you're way better than that," he said, still smirking. Hana smiled and nodded as Naruto paid the check, and they walked out the door quickly. Naruto had one last thing to show Hana before he asked her something very important. Hokage Monument, 8 p.m. On top of the Yandame's head, Naruto and Hana stood. Naruto was gently guiding Hana down a secluded route that led to among the bangs of his father's face. As they reached their destination, Hana gasped. She could see all of the village from here and it looked like the night sky. The lights and noises of a winding down city with beautiful. "Wow, pretty," she said. Naruto chuckled. "Yeah, pretty," he said, never taking his eyes off of her face. When she finally noticed this, she blushed once again. Still, she was done playing games. Her feral side was screaming at her and her logical side was agreeing as well. She knew she wanted to be with him, but she wanted to make sure he was okay with it as well. She slowly closed the distance between their faces and placed a gently kiss on his lips. Naruto was a little surprised she acted so swiftly, but was happy when he started to engage in a tongue war. Their hands started to roam their bodies as they made out. They backed away panting and Hana stared at him with unrestrained lust. Not to say that Naruto didn't have the same look. She leaned forward and her hot breath hit his ear. "I don't plan on sleeping for very long tonight, Naruto-koi. What about you?" she asked sexily. Naruto shivered but stepped back slightly, causing a frown to come to Hana's face. She opened her mouth only to be cut off by Naruto. "Please listen, Hana-chan." Hana was a bit perturbed but fixed him with a stare that said, "You better have a damn good reason for this." Naruto sighed. "If we continue down this way, I wanted to let you know there's no turning back. Once a dragon soul manifests, we become part dragon. If we mark someone, which happens instinctually during sex, we are married to that person forever. I want to be with you, but I wanted to make sure that you understood the consequences." He suddenly found himself pushed against the wall and his lips being ravished by a horny Hana Inuzuka. "I know all about feral instincts, Naruto," she said, breathing hotly onto his ear. "I already knew what would happen because Anko gave me the warning a week ago. Stop fighting it." Naruto gently pushed her off once again and Hana was ready to throw him off the cliff until he reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. "I promised my mom that I'd propose to you before I marked you, Hana-chan." He smirked, seeing her stunned reaction. He got down on one knee and looked up at her. The ring was a beautiful diamond ring with a dragon coiled around the top, with a canine on the bottom, their tails intertwined with their snouts, touching on the other end. "Hana Inuzuka, will you marry me?" he asked seriously. Hana was stunned. It was one thing to mark each other while having sex, but to ask her for her hand in marriage? That was a bit. "Right," she smirked. They may have only been a couple for 2 months according to her time, but it was 4 years for him. Aside from that, they have known each other for years. There's no reason that she can't say yes. After all, a mate mark is the same thing, right? Hana smiled and put out her hand, saying, "Of course. Do you even have to ask?" she said. "Yeah, I do, because my mom would kill me if I didn't," he said while sliding the ring onto her right hand. Hana chuckled and admired the ring before her gaze turned to Naruto once again. "Now, I want my prize and you're keeping it from me," she said, slightly feral. Naruto gulped and chuckled at the same time. I have one last thing for you before we get to the main event, my love, he said. Hana cocked her head to the side as Naruto grabbed her waist, and they disappeared in a golden flash. Namake's estates. Main bedroom, 8:10 p.m. Naruto and Hana arrived with Hana facing away from the bed. Turn around, Tenshinhan. I hope you like what I did to the bed, he said smiling. Hana gently turned around and gasped at the change. Naruto kept his hands around her waist and put his head on her right shoulder while breathing hotly on her neck. What do you think? He asked. Hana smirked. Fun, she said. The regular bed was long gone. In its place was a large recession in the ground. In the recession was a large cushion, along with many pillows and what appeared to be a sheet of furs, cultivated off of naturally dead animals, of course. Around the outside were cushioned stairs that allowed you to slowly descend into the bed that was about mid-thigh level deep. All in all, it looked like a huge dog bed. Naruto chuckled. Glad you like it because I was hoping you'd help me break it in, he said sexily into her ear. Hana smirked and twisted in his grip before making out with him. Oh, I'm sure we will both enjoy breaking it in Teokuen, she said smirking. Begin lemon. If you do not want to read, ignore this part. If you are not of legal age, please skip to the next bolded line. Hana quickly backed up, pulled Naruto towards the bed as she undid his shirt. They reached the edge of the bed and parted so they could climb in without worrying about hurting one another before they were back, on their knees, and kissing each other once again. Naruto's hands were not idle as she slowly undid his shirt. They ran from the sides of her thighs lightly up her stomach and the sides of her breasts before going over and around her shoulders, stopping at the zipper holding her dress on her frame. Hana had discarded his shirt and was gently massaging his chest as he undid the zipper holding her dress up. As it bottomed out, she quickly stood up before shimmying her body and letting the dress fall and flinging it somewhere into the room. Naruto's eyes took in her form. She had on a black lace set that barely covered her assets. The panties she had on had a slight wet spot in them already. Her nipples were poking at their fabric, almost begging to be touched. Naruto was about to move forward when he found himself on his back. Naruto-kun, she said sexily. She straddled him and slid her body back enough for her to reach his waist before undoing his pants while kissing him. She raised her hips and, with a little help, removed the offending article of clothing from his form. She started to kiss and nip at his neck and earlobe while his hands gently roamed over her body. She noticed the bulge in his boxers and smirked before she snaked a hand down them and started to gently stroke him. She quickly noticed he was pretty big and hoped she could accommodate him. She swiftly started kissing down his chest and reached his boxers. He looked down only to see the very sexy Hana grip his boxers and pull them off. She stared for a second before her legs started to grind together as she got wetter. He had to be at least 8 inches long and 2 inches wide. She smirked and started rubbing him again. She used her hand to stimulate his balls and watched as his hands gripped the sheets tighter. She let go, which earned him a whimper until he felt something hot brushing over his cock. He looked down to find that Hana was holding him and proceeded to lick his cock from the underside all the way to the tip. He groaned aloud at her ministrations, and those groans increased tenfold as she reached the head. She smirked once again and swirled her tongue around the head before taking it into her mouth, sucking on it. Naruto was in bliss. First, she was massaging him, then she was licking him, and now she was sucking him off. God, he just wanted to let go right here. However, he held on because he didn't want this to end too soon. After all, if Hana was trying her best, so would he. Hana was smirking around his penis as she continued to suck and lick on it like a lollipop. She could tell he was enjoying it, and, truth be told, she liked seeing him thrashing around like that. Still, she had had enough. She was thoroughly wet and she needed a release. She took Naruto's cock as deep into her mouth as she could and quickly started to massage his balls while sucking him rather strongly. Naruto grunted and groaned, but when Hana started to attack both his balls and his cock, well, he had to release. Hana-chan, I'm going to. UJH. He didn't get to finish, but Hana understood and quickly pulled back. She sucked his head lightly as the first spray of cum hit her mouth. It was thick and somewhat salty. Not the best tasting thing, but I've had worse, were Hana's thoughts as she quickly swallowed the rather large amount of cum spraying into her mouth. Naruto was breathing heavy as he looked down to see Hana swallowing the last bits of his cum. He needed to please her and quickly turned the tables, forcing her onto her back. My turn, Tenshi-chan, he said smirking. Naruto quickly made out with her and reached back to undo her bra. Once the article was thrown away, Naruto quickly nipped and sucked his way down to her left tit. He swirled his tongue around it and then gently sucked on it. Neither have had sex before, and most of this is instinct and physical signs. Hana quickly brought her hands up to his hair as she moaned loudly. She ran her hands through his hair as he suckled her nipple like a newborn babe. "Naruto-kun, switch my other nipple please," she said through her moans. Naruto hastily complied and switched to her right nipple, sucking it much like the first. He let his left hand play with her breast as his right went between her leg. He massaged her lips through her panties and noticed they were thoroughly soaked. Naruto smirked around her nipple and then started to trail down her stomach before glancing up at Hana, who was looking at him with pleading eyes. He grabbed the top of her panties and she lifted herself up so he could pull them off. He quickly threw them away and they landed with a wet splat. Hana burned crimson at that and Naruto eyed her. "Quite happy, are we, Hana-chan?" Hana didn't reply. Naruto ignored it and started to lick her nether lips. He kept this up until she grew frustrated. "Quite teasing me, Naruto," she said, her sexual frustration getting to her. Naruto smirked and stuck his tongue into her folds. She gasped as his wet organ explored every inch of her cavern as fast as it could. Naruto noticed a nub near his nose and quickly attacked it. He noticed that she tensed up really hard when he sucked on it and proceeded to stick 2 fingers into her hole while attacking her clit, if those anatomy books were correct. Hana could feel the orgasm waiting to happen. It was building and building into a white-hot fire in her lower stomach. She wanted the release and Naruto was giving it to her. As his finger brushed a particularly sensitive spot, she screamed his name and came hard. She was seeing white spots. Naruto was surprised at the rather suddenness of her orgasm, but he wasn't complaining. He had quickly moved his mouth to her entrance and lapped up her juices with abandon. She had done the same to him after all. Naruto sat back on his knees as he saw Hana coming down from her orgasm. The way she was panting and staring at his now hard member were obvious signs that she enjoyed it and wanted to do more. Naruto was suddenly on his back with Hana straddling him. She bent down and whispered hotly into his ear, "That was magnificent, Naruto. I think you deserve something better than before." "What about you?" she asked sexily. Naruto could only nod dumbly because she was running her pussy's lips over his length, lubricating him. Hana smirked and rose up, grabbing his tool before placing it at her entrance. "Don't move until I do, okay?" she said before getting a nod from Naruto. She lowered herself slowly until his head was in, then slammed herself the rest of the way down. "God damn," she thought. "I'm glad I broke my hymen during training, or that would have hurt." As it was, Naruto had caused her slight pain and a lot of discomfort. He was big and it was taking a while for her body to get used to it. Naruto's mouth had opened into an O when she pushed herself down on him, and he had to use every ounce of his willpower to not switch positions and fuck her senseless. "Damn, she's tight," he thought. He saw the rather strained look on Hana's face and quickly latched onto her right breast before suckling it again. As he did, Hana started to slowly rock back and forth. She was getting used to him and it felt good to move slightly. She ground her hips in circles before rising up and slamming back down onto him. She quickly repeated the procedure, earning moans from both of them. Naruto's hips moved up to meet hers on the next thrust and Hana smiled softly. This felt good. The pace started to pick up as he kept suckling her breast. Hana found herself laying on her back once again. Naruto had enough of Hana doing that. He could tell he was close to his end and he wanted her to get off as well. He grabbed both her breasts and pushed them together before suckling on the tits simultaneously. She let out loud moans as he continued to rock his hips into hers. Slowly he let go and propped himself up before ramming into her. "Faster, harder." "Oh, Kami-sama, Naruto," Hana said. That work on her breasts had done wonders. Naruto complied with his lover's requests and pulled himself almost all the way out before slamming back into her hole. He grunted in pleasure and Hana moaned aloud. Their pace quickened and this time neither stopped it. "Hana, I am coming," Naruto strained out through grunts. "Yes, harder. Cum Naruto," Hana said loudly. True to her words, Naruto pushed himself as deep as he could, inadvertently hitting her cervix and causing her to climax as he unleashed his baby batter into her womb. They both screamed each other names as Hana's walls milked Naruto for every last drop. By the end, Hana's pussy actually had a little sperm dripping out. Surprisingly, Hana liked that. Naruto gently pulled out of her with a soft plop and sat back for a second before laying down next to his lover. "That was wonderful, Hana-koi," Naruto said, kissing her. Hana chuckled. Yes, it was Naruto-koi, but I still have one more round in me. How about you? She asked sexily. Naruto stared at her for a minute before sitting up and allowing her a glacken at his fully hardened cock. I believe I do, Tenshi-chan. Hana smirked and stood up before bending over the side of the bed with her ass in the air. Care to find out just how much of a bitch I can be? She asked. Naruto lined himself up with her opening and smirked. Sure, Tenshi-chan. I just hope you don't mind me being a little rough, he said before slamming into her pussy. Hana started to rock her hips back to meet Naruto's thrusts, and Naruto reached forward to massage her breasts. Hana was moaning loudly and Naruto was grunting with every thrust. They were already tired and still sensitive from last time, so their climaxes were approaching fast. Naruto grabbed her hips and pistoned in and out. Hana couldn't keep up anymore and let her lover do all the work while she moaned aloud in appreciation. Naruto gave a deep growl as he thrust himself deep inside her, filling her once again as he bit down on her neck. Hana screamed in pleasure double-fold from the marking and the climax he had given her. As his growl died down and he slipped out of her, she turned around and latched onto his neck, marking him as her own. Lemon end. Hope you enjoyed it. Hana and Naruto cuddled in their new bed, happily mated. Hana drew little circles on Naruto's chest as she stared at the mate mark she gave him. It was a golden dragon with a dark brown wolf cuddled up under its wing. She smiled at his and gently kissed it, sending shivers down Naruto's spine. Naruto was happy. He had his mate, his new bed, and a wife, not to mention he fulfilled his promise to his mom. He smiled seeing Hana's mate mark, a golden dragon in flight with a brown wolf running next to it. Yes, today was definitely a good day. He looked down to see Hana fast asleep. Good night, Tenshi-chan. Sweet dreams, he said, kissing her chastely.